He can punch a legendary spirit beast with enough force to split an entire forest clean in half. The impact is so massive it can be seen from outer space, even clearing the skies for miles around. And with nothing more than a clap of his hands, he can shake the entire forest. You'd think someone this powerful would be living the ultimate fantasy life. But instead, he spent years trapped in an endless frozen wasteland, surrounded by a bunch of barbarians with almost nothing to do. Back in the real world, he'd already achieved everything he ever wanted. But reality was never the fantasy he dreamed of, so every night he wished to be reincarnated into a fantasy world. And one day, that wish finally came true. The White Wasteland was home to countless legendary monsters, a white serpent that devours glaciers. That dream doesn't even survive his first week. And a vile rat that pollutes the entire sea. But an emperor who returned alive from there once said something. Instead, he starts wishing the entire world would just end already. We see a group of merchants crossing the frozen plains. Freezing to death, the mercenaries complain to their captain about taking the insane job of crossing the White Wasteland. Inside the carriage, the butler scoffs at their complaints before asking the young lady if she's comfortable. Then reality finally sinks in. Somehow he actually has a system. The soldiers' constant complaints annoy the butler, but Milena reminds him to be polite since they were the only ones willing to accept such a dangerous job. She even suggests letting them inside, but the butler warns her about the monsters lurking in the wasteland. His words remind her of an old story. An emperor once set out to conquer the White Wasteland in his dream of ruling the world. He marched in with countless soldiers and warriors by his side. But years after his empire collapsed, he returned completely alone, having lost every single one of his men. Realizing he could be next, he immediately shuts the curtains and hides from anything lurking outside. It was the barbarians instead. The butler dismisses it as nothing more than a legend, saying that while many of those monsters were later proven real, no one has ever seen a barbarian. Suddenly, the entire caravan comes to an abrupt stop after spotting someone ahead. The captain and every mercenary immediately raise their guard as the figure approaches. Judging by his appearance alone, they realize he's a barbarian. Meanwhile, our boy smiles, calling himself lucky for finally meeting outsiders after spending every day surrounded by nothing but barbarians. He respectfully greets the group. Noticing they're merchants, he calmly tells them to turn back, leaving everyone frightened. He then notices someone sitting inside the carriage. An idea suddenly comes to him, and he asks them to hire him. The group is shocked by the unexpected request, but our boy calmly offers to escort them across the White Wasteland. They ask if he truly has no hostile intentions, and he replies that they'd all be dead already if he did. The zombie just sits there for a second, looking completely confused, revealing that the barbarian wants to work as their mercenary. Milena first asks how things would end if they fought him, and the captain immediately advises against it. With no better option, she agrees to hire him. Then our guy has an idea. If Chi-Wei likes him enough, maybe she'll stop trying to eat him. He tells everyone to relax and asks to meet his employer face to face. Some of the guards suggest stopping him before he gets any closer, but the captain calls that idea completely ridiculous. Keatle finally reaches the carriage and politely asks for permission to come inside. Milena agrees, and our boy flashes a sharp grin before stepping into the carriage. Keatle steps into the carriage and calms the panicking butler down, insisting he means no harm. Milena freezes, realizing a real barbarian from the legends is standing right in front of her. She manages a nervous greeting, and he returns it just as calmly. He notices it's surprisingly warm inside, and she explains that it's simply magic. He warns her plainly that crossing this place with those mercenaries alone would leave their odds close to none, but he'll protect them on one condition. She asks what he wants. His price is knowledge of the world outside these snowfields. She repeats it back suspiciously, wondering if she even has a choice. Satisfied, he presses on and asks for her name. Milena of House Akasha, she answers. Stuck out here, any outside information is priceless to him, especially since most humans he's met so far have either panicked or lost their minds. For once, he thinks, someone he can actually talk to. He notices she's transporting weapons. Startled, she asks how he could tell. He can hear the clang of steel from the wagons, so how could he not? He asks if there's a war going on out there, and she confirms it. The Empire and the Kingdom are at war. The Empire's pushing forward with overwhelming numbers, but the Kingdom isn't easily beaten. That's because a sword master and a hero are guarding the border. A hero? A sword master? What kind of powers do they even have? She asks if he knows about mysteries, and he admits he's never been outside this place. She doesn't know all the details herself, but she explains what she can. A power called mystery can only be sensed or used by a few, split into ranks. Even a third-rate can just barely sense it. Second-rate and up can actually wield it, while first-rate can manifest it as mana or aura, usually among knights, mages, and spirit summoners. Above that sit the transcendent, beings who can freely wield mystery and split the heavens and earth themselves. The sword master belongs here. And beyond even that stands the hero, a being who's gone past mystery entirely to influence the world itself, a legend in his own right. Even a third-rate is considered powerful somewhere, since having any rank at all is that rare. She decides she wants to meet them, then calls out to him. Sir Keatle? Lost in thought, he can't even remember how long he's been trapped here. He was simply desperate to survive. All he knows is that this is some snowfield in a fantasy world, one he still can't escape. He really wants to get out of this place. No, he tells himself. He needs to get out. She calls out again. Sir Keatle, you're a barbarian, correct? Fair to say so, he replies, and judging by her reaction, she already knew. Yes, she says, because of the legend. A legend? About him? She recaps it. Some emperor, or maybe just a madman, raving about him. Keatle can't help but laugh. She notices how many wagons of weapons they're carrying and asks if there's a reason they're crossing this snowfield. They need a lot of money, she admits. Her family's been in business for generations, building real wealth, until jealous rivals sabotage them. Now they're deep in debt. So this is a merchant's trip to settle that debt, he reasons, meaning she must be planning to sell weapons to the kingdom. He lays it out. Since the empire, pushing forward with numbers, wouldn't be short on supply, it must be the kingdom that needs weapons, and low supply with high demand means the price goes up. He doesn't know the value out there, but guesses it's worth risking a life to cross the snowfield for. He asks if there's really no other way to reach the kingdom, or whether her territory's border touches the empire's. She freezes, since she'd heard the legendary barbarian was just an ignorant savage. So who is he, really? Suddenly the wagon jolts hard, and the butler panics, stunned. Keatle tenses, sensing it immediately. They've got uninvited guests. A black shape rises out of the snow with a piercing shriek, towering over the group as Keatle and the others freeze, staring up at it. The guard flinches, stammering in disbelief, while behind him Melina's eyes go wide with fear. Black slime? She blurts, though Keatle just tilts his head, calm as ever, wondering if that's really what it's called. Not many who've tried crossing this snowfield make it back, but the ones who do all write about the same monster, black slime. Melina turns to him, asking if he knows about it too. Keatle casually says the black slimes are surprisingly edible and even make for a decent snack. He even jokingly tells her she's free to catch one herself if she wants to try it. Before she can finish, he cuts in, reminding her of the contract they made. He explains that he promised to protect their lives, but has no intention of getting involved unless real danger shows up. She blinks, thrown, asking what he means. He smirks, since more importantly, he wants to see how strong this outside world's fighters really are. Shield. The captain barks, and his spearman answers, yes. The spearman charges the slime, straining, but his blade just bounces off with a hollow clang. Another merc leaps in behind him for a second strike. Don't stop, keep attacking, the captain shouts, his sword flaring green. He warns them that simple attacks won't work, telling them to aim for the core hidden inside. He raises his glowing blade overhead and brings it down in one clean strike. The slime dissolves into purple smoke, leaving nothing behind but a small red core in the snow. We won, one of them shouts, relief crashing over the whole group. Melina breathes out in relief, while Keatle just glances over, quiet. The march keeps going, and another beast comes snarling out of the snow before it's put down, the captain reminding everyone not to let their guard down since they're not even halfway through yet. One of the hooded mercs mutters his doubts, wondering if that barbarian's even really strong, or if it's all just the Emperor's legends. Another chimes in, saying the guy's basically the bottom of the food chain out here, and it's starting to feel like he's just exploiting off them. The captain overhears, uneasy, wondering if they should at least test his skills. Keatle's face gives nothing away. One of the doubters walks up to Melina, since he's got something to say to her. She's caught off guard by the word test, but he presses on, insisting they're risking their lives for this mission. She reminds him she's always been grateful they took the job, crossing the white snowfield like this. To herself, though, she's glad they didn't run off like the others did just hearing the details. But this one thing, she can't accept. He presses further, since that barbarian hasn't fought even once, and she starts to protest before trailing off. He asks it straight out. Can he test whether that barbarian really deserves this kind of special treatment? She's thrown, repeating the word test, back uncertainly. Meanwhile, the captain's already leveling with Keatle, admitting he tried to stop them, but they wouldn't listen. Keatle just smirks, since they want to test his skills, and he doesn't mind, but says it's not possible right now, leaving the others confused. He nods ahead. They've got guests waiting for them up there. Unseen to them, something in the dark has already noticed the frail mortals arriving. It hits without warning, one of them crying out with a weapon half drawn while the other spins around in shock. The monster sneered and ordered the mortals to bark for him. That'll just be seasoning for him. Melina's caught in the middle of it, magic flaring around her as she tries to hold on. Keatle steps up, calm as ever. These people are my guests. Go back, snake. The giant white snake recoils, hissing. You. Why are you here? It presses him, asking has he forgotten the laws of the snowfields, and what happens if he strays from his tribe's territory. Keatle cuts him off, saying that's none of his concern, and the snake bristles, refusing to accept it. It rears back, furious, declaring itself the snake, and demanded to know why a barbarian dared stand against it. It rages on, since it won't take orders from anyone, not when it was promised immutability. Then you need to be taught a lesson, Keatle says, power gathering around his fist. The blow lands, and the whole clearing erupts in light. The snake screams, swallowed by the blast. He muttered that this was clearly the type who only listened after a beating, standing over what's left of it. Melina watches from a distance, stunned by what she just witnessed. He flexes his fist and walks back like nothing happened. Someone drops to their knees, crying, I've committed a sin worthy of death. Please, spare my life. While Keatle waves it off, since it's only natural not to trust a stranger right away. The caravan rolls on. Melina catches up to him, saying there's something she's curious about, and he glances back, caught off guard. She's noticed his manner, his speech, that he's clearly no ordinary hired agent, and wonders why he'd personally risk his life on a trip like this. She answers her own question instead, explaining she's the first daughter of Lady Beliaka, concubine to Lord Kazakh Akasha. He asks if she means a concubine, a second wife. Her mother came through a political marriage, only to be used and then abandoned. She catches herself, realizing she didn't mean to reveal that much. She turns it back on him, since he volunteered for this trip too, even knowing it could cost him his life. Because someone has to set the example, he says. She tells him he's quite intelligent, catching him off guard. She flusters, catching herself. You are? Lurch. Oh, he just quirks a brow. The captain calls out that they've arrived. Keatle looks out at the open green fields. It's grass. The butler thanks him and asks how he'll manage the trip back. Keatle says by then, he can simply pass through the empire. The butler calls to him again, hesitant. Melina brings it up, reminding him that before, he called her intelligent and ambitious, and asking what he meant by that. I meant exactly what I said, he tells her. You're intelligent and very ambitious. The butler stiffens. Her family was once renowned, he says, now teetering on ruin from a lack of funds, and even as a concubine's daughter, if she moves to carve her own path while the family falls apart around her, who does she think the rest of them will choose to follow? Her real goal is to take control of the family, isn't it? Am I wrong, he asks. She freezes, eyes wet. A perfect answer. No. To herself, she admits this barbarian is sharp, not like the fools who just think they're clever. She turns to him, Lord Keatle, if he ever consider leaving the snowfields. She asked if he'd consider joining her instead. He tells her he'll decline for now, since he's still got things to finish here. She takes it in quietly. She holds something out, asking if he'll accept it. He grins, since if it's a gift, he'll gladly take it. She and the butler watch him go. Someday, I will pray that we meet again. He walks off alone through the snow, back turned. 5 years pass in the white snowfields, and finally, every condition's been met. System windows flash across his view. 784th quest complete. Reward distributed. Conditions met. You may now leave the snowfields. He steps forward into the light. He grins wide, since this is finally the fantasy world he's longed for, and it's time to take his first step. He breathes it all in. The fragrant smell of grass, and underneath it, faintly, the smell of a beast, since he could never once catch out on the snowy plains, and for the first time in years, it feels good just to notice them. He smiles to himself, taking it in and letting the moment sit for a while before moving on. Then he spots something ahead through the trees and picks up his pace, sure that has to be a village, and after everything, he's finally found a proper, civilized place in this world. But as he gets closer, an old man's voice rings out to the group behind him, calling them elf villagers and telling them that from this day on, this will be their new home. The elder plants his staff and raises his voice, telling everyone to unpack their things, and the villagers behind him erupt into cheers, fists raised, relieved to finally stop moving. One of the younger elves hesitates, then speaks up, calling out to the elder, who turns and asks what's the matter. The younger elf asks if this place is really safe, and the elder answers simply that it is. He explains why, hauling logs as he talks. This is an extremely remote area, so remote that humans can't even reach it. The younger one admits he already knew that much, but there's still something nagging at him, since the snowy plains are right nearby. He puts it plainly. He's worried the monsters from those plains might wander over, because it's just too close for comfort. The elder isn't shaken, insisting it's not a problem, since for thousands of years, nothing has ever come out of those snowy plains. And even if something did come, he adds, it still wouldn't matter, because they have Her Majesty the Queen watching over them. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Keetle stops mid-step, frowning, feeling like something just tore, and wondering, almost to himself, if he touched something he shouldn't have. A small voice gasps nearby, and he turns to find a little elf girl staring back at him, wide-eyed. An elf, he realizes, catching himself off guard. Not far off, an elven woman studies him with quiet interest, thinking he's one of the most iconic races in any fantasy world, amused that she's run into one this soon. What luck! The little girl, meanwhile, is close to tears, clutching her hands together, scared and unsure where she is, having clearly wandered too far from home. Keetle crouches down slightly and gives her a small wave, saying hello and trying to sound as unthreatening as a man his size possibly can. It doesn't work. She flinches back, eyes rolling, and faints on the spot before he can say another word. He kneels there beside her in silence for a moment, unsure what exactly just happened. He hasn't even managed a proper conversation with her, and she's already fainted, so, weighing his options, he figures there's really only one thing left to do. Carry the child back to the village himself. Chaos erupts as a child screams, and someone gasps in disbelief that a human's made it in here, while Keetle holds the girl, and a woman shrieks for her child. An elf lunges at him with a spear, demanding to know what he is and how he broke through the barrier, which is not at all what Keetle expected. Elsewhere, panic spreads through the village as someone shouts to the elder that there's a crack in the barrier. He pales and asks where the queen is, and the answer comes back that she's out on patrol. Keetle raises his hands, trying to explain he means no harm, but another elf cuts him off, threatening to hunt him down if he doesn't return the child. He just stares back, sweating, wondering if he really looks like a kidnapper to them. He sets the girl down gently and tells her to go on, return to her people. Turning to face the elder and the crowd, he tries again, saying he's returned the child, and, as they can see, he's no enemy of theirs. The elder isn't interested in listening, and instead bellows to the villagers that the hostage has been released. Taking that as her cue, an archer orders everyone to attack. Arrows rain down on him, and he can only sigh, wondering if they can really not hear a word he's saying. Keetle watches streaks of light rain from the sky, murmuring that so this is what real power feels like, then raises a hand and tells himself to stay calm. He lets the punch fly, and the shockwave tears the sky and ground apart. Elsewhere, elf soldiers cry out in pain from the force of it, and scramble to order the barrier deployed. An old elf elder stares at the massive crater left behind, stunned, demanding to know what this could possibly be. Standing amid the wreckage, Keetle tells them plainly that he isn't their enemy. He rubs the back of his neck, admitting with a sheepish laugh that maybe he failed to control his strength, then notices the elves closing in around him. A blast of flame comes streaking straight at him, and he turns his head just as it flares past, singeing close. The fire detonates behind him in a massive explosion. Out of the blaze, a voice cries, "Your Majesty," as a golden-haired elf woman steps through the flowers, the elf queen, demanding to know what's going on here. Keetle raises his hands and says he'd appreciate it if she'd just listen to what he has to say. She eyes him coldly, saying even a powerhouse like him is targeting them and muttering that humans truly are disgusting, then draws back a flaming arrow, vowing to make him pay the price for his greed. Keetle frowns, wondering aloud whether she simply can't understand him, since they're clearly speaking the same language, or if the relationship between humans and elves is just that poor. Wind howls and water surges around him, coiling into an enormous dragon-shaped torrent that roars straight for him. Keetle answers it head-on, his fist wrapping in surging purple energy as he braces for the clash. The two forces collide head-on, and the shockwave rips straight up through the ravine in a column of light, tearing rock and water apart. The elf queen is thrown back by the force of it, eyes blown wide, breath catching in her throat. She lands hard in the smoking crater left behind, stunned into silence. Keetle winces, wondering to himself if he should have held back even more than he did. Shaken, the queen tells the knight beside her that this man is powerful, easily above a transcendent, and he can only ask how someone that strong ended up here. Gathering herself, she screams for everyone to flee. Then she turns back to face him, admitting she recognizes his strength, but swears he'll never accomplish whatever he came here for. Keatle blinks, insisting he only wanted to talk, then trails off, sensing this has spiraled completely out of his control. Ignoring him, she raises her hands and begins a summoning chant, calling on the one who sets the blackest dark ablaze, the one who bears horns of pure flame. Fire erupts and coils into the shape of a massive bull, Pigo, answering the call. Keatle's eyes light up at the sight of it, a real summon, remarking that the creatures he ran into back in the tundra were always something grotesque and twisted, but the beast standing before him now is a bull crowned in blazing fire. The queen orders it flatly, Pigo, annihilate the enemy before you. Pigo only scoffs, muttering that conflict was never worth the trouble, since humans are nothing but a hassle. Fulfill the contract, she snaps again, Pigo. So the contract is simple, the bull reasons, just kill the human in front of him. He tilts his head, and something catches his eye. It's Keatle, grinning back at him wide and wrong, eyes glinting red. Pigo's thought curdles. Is that even human? Wreathed in fire, Pigo glares down at Keatle and makes up his mind. I've decided, he says. I'll reduce you to ash and leave nothing behind. He charges at once, blazing with flame and closing the distance in an instant, while Keatle holds his ground even as the wind tears past him from the force of it. Keatle blocks the charge head-on, gritting out a strained "urgh" as he takes the impact, and is pushed back a step by the sheer force of the blow. Still, he only smirks. A beastly form, he says. That puts me at ease. Then he counters with a punch straight into Pigo. Makes it easier to beat you to death. The shockwave rips through the clearing, and the elf queen cries out, "Kyhhh," before dropping into a crouch amid the wreckage, stunned. What is this? Time passes, and the scene settles into calm. Keatle and the elf queen now sit together on a rocky outcrop, watching the sky. After a long conversation, the elves finally come around. He truly isn't their enemy. The elf queen bows low. Sorry, human. We judged too hastily. Keatle waves it off easily. It's fine. You said you were driven here by humans, so I understand. Still, it's a little sad you never gave me a chance to explain. She glances at him, still uncertain. You're really not one of the humans chasing us. This is my first time even seeing an elf, he says. There aren't any in the White Wasteland to begin with. She startles. What? The White Wasteland? The Ashen Barbarian of the Wasteland, he says. That's what the outsiders call me. She stares at him, shaken. Impossible. I didn't think humans could even survive there. But she quickly composes herself and straightens up. I've been rather rude, haven't I? Is there anything you'd like? If you wish it, I'll do whatever I can. Keatle thinks it over. A spirit, huh? The elf queen hesitates, since that might not be possible. But if he truly wants to contract a spirit, she tells him to go to Elfo Sagrado, the holy land where the god of the elves resides. Keatle raises a brow. A holy land of the elves. Would a human like me even be allowed in? Normally, no, she admits. But with my introduction, it should be. She holds something out to him from the cliffside. Take this with you. He accepts it. I'll accept it with thanks. A towering, antlered figure looms in the light as she goes on. Of course, even if you get close, our god may still test you. But I think you'll pass. I wish you luck. Thank you, Keatle replies. She introduces herself. I am the queen of the leaf tribe that turns brown in autumn, Marzelia Haitian Karuja. And your name is? I am Keatle, he says. Keatle the Barbarian. Elsewhere, a burst of power tears through the landscape as Keatle cuts loose, pressing forward through the chaos, unrelenting. At the border of the Varkan territory in the kingdom of Gehentra, guards scramble in confusion. What was that? What's going on? We don't know. Something is approaching. The head guard barks the order. Sound the bell. Call all guards to arms. Far off, a lone figure steps out through the settling dust and starts toward the gate. That lone figure was Keatle. Spotting the patrol ahead, Keatle tilts his head, asking if they're guards. He flashes an easy grin and adds that it's nice to meet them. The soldiers immediately level their spears, shouting for him to stop and warning that one more step gets him attacked. Keatle holds his ground and states flatly that he isn't their enemy. The lead knight doesn't lower his blade, demanding to know exactly what he's after. Keatle only pauses, weighing his answer. One of the guards glances past him toward the wall, uneasy. Keatle answers plainly that he'd like to visit their territory. The knight presses him on whether his goal is simply to pass through. Keatle clarifies that if possible, he'd like to stay a while. The knight asks if he carries any form of identification. Keatle admits he has no such thing. He holds up a pendant instead, asking whether this is enough to verify who he is. The knight recognizes it at once as the crest of House Akasha. Keatle explains he received it from someone of that bloodline, and the knight reasons to himself that if it truly belongs to the Akashas, they're the merchant house out of the Denayan kingdom. He recalls it now, the house that came to the White Wastelands a few years back. When Keatle asks if he knows them, the knight only notes that it's a family that's been rising fast lately. Studying the pendant, he mutters that it doesn't look fake, though he still can't confirm it. Keatle asks if it isn't native to this kingdom, and the knight tells him plainly that this is the kingdom of Gehentra. It can't be confirmed, he admits, but it's helpful enough. Keatle may enter, he says, sliding the pendant back, though there's a condition attached. They need confirmation, he tells him, that Keatle isn't a threat. 3 others are trying to enter the territory right now, he explains, and since none of their identities can be confirmed either, the condition is for all of them to clear a dungeon near the domain together. Keatle agrees without hesitation, telling him he accepts. The knight adds that there's one more condition. Time skip. Once the dungeon is cleared, he's told he'll need to report everything that happened inside. The knight clears his throat and says that's enough talk for now. Time to get going. Alessandro groans, then lets out a bitter little laugh, muttering that even if it's the law, raiding a dungeon alongside rats who go after people's pockets is asking a lot. Introducing him, self-proclaimed paladin Alessandro Tyrannus, arms crossed, clearly unhappy to be here. Kazan needles him, asking why he's picking a fight again, old man, wondering if he's still sore that some thief once scammed him out of his fortune. Alessandro snaps, calling him a bastard and demanding how dare a petty thief insult a paladin. Kazan just laughs it off, asking if that's really how paladins dress these days, then keeps needling, mocking the name Tyrannus itself and asking what kind of dumbass surname that even is. Alessandro rounds on him, a shout catching in his throat, but Kazan only grins wider, resting a curved blade loose in his grip and asking if that ragged armor is really supposed to protect him. A third voice cuts in, tired, asking if the two of them could please just stop. It's Hayes, cleric of Kalosia, sitting apart from the mess with her hands folded, wondering quietly if this is really going to be okay. As the two men keep tearing at each other, a passing note explains that a dungeon party needs a minimum of 4, and one more member should be arriving shortly. A knight announces that the last person has arrived. Kazan mutters under his breath, hoping this one's actually sane. The door opens, and the room goes tense the moment he steps through, someone visibly flinching at the sight of him. Keatle grins and asks if they're his party members, and Kazan breaks into a cold sweat, muttering about the sheer pressure coming off the guy. The escorting knight tells them to talk among themselves for now, promising he'll be back shortly. Keatle takes the lead, suggesting they start with introductions, and gives his own. He's a barbarian, and his name is Keatle. The room falls into an awkward beat, the 4 of them sizing each other up. The knight returns, telling them that if everyone's ready, it's time to head out. Keatle and Alessandro trade one last uneasy glance before the group finally moves. The knight glances back and announces that they've arrived, gesturing toward the cave ahead wreathed in a strange golden haze, the dungeon entrance. Keatle's mouth curls into a slow grin as the knight lays out the terms, clear the dungeon, and return with the proof. In the dark, something moves fast and strikes hard, and Keatle's eyes open right after, catching a faint clattering sound nearby. Keatle stands with his boot on a skull-like creature, muttering to himself that this thing must only be able to move using its head. He turns back and apologizes for taking so long, and one of his cloaked companions quickly tells him not to worry, since he can take all the time he needs. Keatle grins and says it's time to move again, and the 3 companions snap up, answering together in a flustered rush. The group steps into a new area, as one of them notes they've reached the 2nd floor. One companion pulls his scarf up and breathes out slowly into the cold, while Keatle glances back and suggests they take a short rest, then agrees with himself that it's probably the right call. The group settles down to rest, worn out, while Keatle quietly watches them without saying a word. He speaks up, saying he wants to ask something about the dungeon, and the nun beside him looks over, a little surprised. He admits he doesn't know much on the subject, so she asks what exactly he's curious about. Elsewhere, a woman walking near the edge of town mentions that this dungeon sits rather close to where people live. Keatle asks if there's ever been any trouble with the dungeon or its monsters, and the nun explains that dungeon monsters usually don't leave on their own, though when they do, those cases get caught and handled early. She explains that when a dungeon appears, the local lord checks how dangerous it is, then sends out mercs, guards, or other outsiders to clear it, and Keatle asks if they ever appear inside the territory itself, to which she says no, they always show up at a set distance away. Keatle grins wide, asking if there's usually a reward for clearing one, and someone in armor answers that yes, there's normally a boss on the last floor, and beating it earns various rewards, with a dungeon this size promising quite a haul. He smirks to himself, muttering that it's just like the game, and when the nun asks what game he means, he brushes it off, saying he was only talking to himself. He says there's one more thing he's curious about, and she tells him to go ahead and ask. He asks who exactly makes these dungeons, and she answers that they occur naturally, that no one creates them. But he points out there are too many strange details for that to add up, since they always appear near populated areas, almost as if daring people to explore them, and for something supposedly natural, it feels far too deliberate. She admits, almost to herself, that it was always just something people accepted, so it never even occurred to her to question it. He agrees quietly, saying it's true. He'd never really considered it either, and he never even doubted it before now. He thinks to himself that barbarians are supposedly an ignorant, savage people by every account, but if everything he knows is right, he wonders whether this man could really be a typical barbarian at all. Someone murmurs how interesting this is, watching him closely. Keatle turns to the group and asks if everyone's rested enough, then says it's time to set off again, and they all start moving deeper into the dungeon together. They come across a large chest sitting in the dark, and Keatle tilts his head, asking what it is. Someone explains it's a treasure chest, one of the maze's rewards, telling him he can have it if he manages to unlock it. Someone else murmurs that a rogue skilled enough for this wouldn't really belong in a dungeon like this, sighing that it's a shame, but they'll probably have to leave it behind, until Keatle turns and asks Kazan to unlock it instead. Kazan panics inwardly, thinking that someone like him, not even acknowledged by the guild, has no business knowing how to pick locks. Keatle watches him with an expectant look, while Kazan admits to himself that if he's honest, that excitement is about to turn straight into disappointment. He imagines being mocked for calling himself a rogue when he can't even manage this, told flatly that he's useless. Forcing a nervous laugh, he says he'll go ahead and give it a try. He can feel Keatle's eyes on him from behind, thinking to himself that if he fails this, he's not making it out of here alive. Kazan finally gets the lock open, grinning through tears and a nosebleed, stunned it actually worked, while Keatle cheers him on, amazed, calling it seriously impressive. He asks how much the contents are worth, and the nun answers that a regular family could live comfortably on it for about a month. Meanwhile, Kazan was in a pure disbelief at how he did so. Keatle tells Kazan to take charge of the rewards. While Kazan was looking over the treasure, just calling his name by Keatle rattled his skeleton. The group moves on deeper into the dungeon. Someone suddenly calls for everyone to stop, warning that skeletons lie ahead. The warrior counts 4 skeletons up ahead and says he'll take care of 3 of them himself. Keatle grins, telling him to leave the last one to him. Kazan mutters uneasily that the sight of bones assembling themselves still gives him chills every time. The skeletons shriek to life, eyes glowing as they close in, and the battle begins. Keatle grins, telling the others this is a rare sight not to interrupt, since he'll handle all of them himself. He tears through the skeletons in one fluid, brutal strike. Someone watches on, visibly unsettled by what they're seeing. The warrior throws himself into the fight as well, adding his own strength to the clash. Keatle says it's genuinely impressive seeing the party's core skills in action firsthand, then adds that with the obstacles cleared, they might as well enjoy the show. Someone murmurs uneasily to themselves that somehow, this barbarian is testing them. The group catches their breath afterward, worn out from the fight. Someone remarks there's no doubt the ones who came to this snowfield must be strong after all, while Keatle looks on quietly. On the 3rd floor, the skeletons' numbers grow larger, but with Keatle leading the charge, the party pushes through without much trouble. At last, they push forward toward what lies ahead. They reach the deepest part of the dungeon, and the warrior tenses, on guard. They arrive at an ornate throne room, and dread creeps in as they realize what's seated there, a skeleton knight. One of them recoils, unable to understand why something like that would be down here. Keatle asks whether this skeleton is different from the ones they've already faced. The nun explains, shaken, that a skeleton wielding a longsword and shield so freely could only be knight level, and if that's the case, they stand no real chance of winning. She admits this is a monster they simply can't handle, and asks what happens if they can't clear it and choose to retreat instead. Keatle tells her that in that case, the territory would be asked to confirm the decision, and as long as it holds up as reasonable, it should be processed without any issue. He adds simply that retreating here would be a reasonable call. The skeleton knight looms over them in full, radiating menace as it waits. Keatle studies the skeleton knight standing before him, quietly impressed that something like this could hold its shape without falling apart. Without warning, the knight lunges forward, sword raised high and ready to strike. Someone shouts for everyone to watch out as a wave of dark pink energy tears across the group, throwing them all off their feet in a cloud of dust and smoke. Still catching his breath, The mustached warrior can only stare in disbelief, unable to believe a single hit could carry that much power. Nearby, another fighter mutters that the knight is simply too strong for them to handle. The knight rises above them again, dark energy swirling around its blade as it braces for another strike. Ketil calmly steps forward to meet it head-on. He takes the full hit without so much as flinching, and the force of his counterattack sends the knight stumbling backward. Once it's over, the whole party is left stunned after Ketil defeats the Skull Knight so effortlessly. Ketil grins and glances toward the fallen knight, asking if that's really all it's got. Kazan just stares back at him, still wide-eyed from what he witnessed. Later, Kazan panics in front of a locked chest, insisting its lock is too advanced for him to open, so Ketil simply punches it open himself. Kazan yelps, stunned that it actually worked. Smoke puffs into the air as the group gathers around the now-open chest. Ketil remarks that the rewards turned out even better this way, then tells Kazan to handle sorting the rest. The group makes its way toward the dungeon's exit, with lights spilling in from up ahead. They step back out onto the surface as snow swirls around them and the dungeon disappears behind them. Kazan explains that when a dungeon is cleared perfectly, it disappears entirely, then notes there doesn't seem to have been a secret room this time. Ketil asks if secret rooms are actually real, and Kazan admits, a little nervously, that they exist but are rare. Ketil grins and says that sounds fun too. Back at the checkpoint, a red-haired guard captain is startled by how quickly they've returned from the dungeon. He asks how the dungeon run went. Ketil gives him a thumbs up and declares it was very satisfying, leaving the guard a little unsettled by his energy. The guard captain tells them he'll proceed with the entry procedure and has them follow him inside one by one. Alone with his thoughts, he wonders whether it's really wise to let the barbarian stay in the domain. A priestess nearby says it should be fine, though she notices he trails off whenever the barbarian comes up. Another guard adds that Ketil doesn't seem like the type to cause trouble. The captain admits that despite his monstrous strength, Ketil brought no harm to his own party, concluding that he's very different from a typical barbarian. Ketil cheerfully praises his teammates, noting that Kazan disarmed traps and even picked the chest's lock, that Alexandro held the front line reliably, and that Hayes' prayers were a great help in battle. The captain remarks how unusual that is, since forced-together strangers clearing a dungeon usually have nothing good to say about each other. He decides to grant them entry. He hands over a pouch, explaining it's the reward for clearing the dungeon and telling them to divide it among themselves, adding that guards often confiscate such rewards instead. Ketil holds up the pouch and announces they'll divide it fairly. When his teammates look startled, he asks if they aren't all part of the same party that work together, insisting the reward must be shared and that they shouldn't refuse. As the group heads off, onlookers murmur about a barbarian who can fell a skeleton knight in a single blow. Word spreads that he is monstrously strong. People whisper that he's at least knight level or higher, clearly no typical barbarian, calling him the barbarian of legend and an existence unlike anything they've seen before. The guard captain leaves one of his men on watch, telling him he's going to see the Lord. The soldier salutes and confirms. Night falls over the domain as the captain makes his way to the Lord's grand hall. Announced at the door, he's told to enter. He approaches the Lord's desk and addresses him formally. Lord Luke Barkin, ruler of the Barkin domain in the Gehentra kingdom, looks up and asks what's the matter. The captain reports that as first captain of the Barkin guard, he has news. A barbarian has appeared in the domain. In the throne room, the Lord leans forward and asks whether his captain truly gave the barbarian permission to enter their territory in the first place. The captain admits that, at the time, he judged it wouldn't cause any real trouble down the line. Unconvinced, the Lord presses him further, wanting to know what the actual problem is, then, if it seemed harmless enough. The captain explains that the barbarian is strong enough that he could genuinely become a serious issue if things go wrong. Curious now, the Lord asks exactly how strong the man really is. The captain reveals he's heard, secondhand, that the barbarian felled a skeleton knight with nothing more than a single blow. At the mention of a skeleton knight, the Lord's eyes narrow sharply, the weight of that name clearly not lost on him. He asks outright whether the captain means the barbarian ranks among the world's first-rate fighters. The captain answers that it's highly likely, and that the man might well surpass even that. Pressed again for certainty, he admits he simply can't rule it out. Weighing everything he's heard, the Lord decides that summoning the barbarian himself is the wisest course for now. The captain hesitates, quietly questioning whether that's truly a safe move to make. The Lord reassures him not to worry, since his knight will be standing right beside him the whole time. He then turns and asks the knight directly for his honest opinion on the matter. The knight brushes the concern aside without hesitation, dismissing the barbarian as nothing more than an ignorant brute with some raw power, but no real intellect behind it. Having heard them both out, the Lord resolves to summon the barbarian anyway and judge the man for himself, in person. Meanwhile, back at the inn, Ketel happily digs into a hearty feast spread across the table, praising both the food and the peaceful atmosphere around him, while the innkeeper insists he eat his fill since it's all on the house tonight. Nearby, He-Eyes bursts into laughter at something someone says, while Alexandro sits with his arms crossed, looking thoroughly unimpressed by the whole scene. Someone at the table presses Alexandro on whether he's really a holy knight, and he answers, a little flustered, that he is. They push further, pointing out that they never once saw him call on any divine power while they were clearing the dungeon together. Caught off guard, Alexandro can only clear his throat awkwardly, clearly embarrassed by the question. Ketel, curious, asks about the god Alexandro follows, a deity named Kaloja, and wonders aloud if there's a temple nearby. The pink-haired woman beside him explains there probably isn't one close by, since Kaloja isn't exactly known for being a welcoming deity. Turning the conversation back to Ketel, someone leans in and quietly asks just how strong he really is. Ketel admits he's honestly still curious himself, since it hasn't been long since he left the snowfields and started keeping track of his own rank. He asks the others in turn whether they have any particular plans or schedules going forward. Hearing that they don't plan to stay together much longer, Ketel remarks it's a shame, since it means this is where they'll part ways. Still, he adds with a grin that he's sure they'll all cross paths again someday, prompting He-Eyes to jokingly declare the exact opposite, that she never wants to see him again. As the group settles down again, someone else at the table can't help but choke a little on their drink, still stuck on the news that Ketel walked away with 1,000 gold dungeon reward. Later that night, Ketel stretches out alone on the bed in his new room, murmuring to himself that this quiet little space is nothing short of paradise. That night, Ketel dreams of setting out on a new adventure, his mind drifting to the sacred grounds of the elves, the towering magic tower, and the distant royal capital. He wakes with a start, still groggy and disoriented from the dream. Getting up, he accidentally stirs He-Eyes awake and quickly apologizes for disturbing her. She sleepily asks who's at the door, and a voice from the other side asks for the captain of the guard. He's informed that the Lord wishes to see him in person. In the hallway, a servant asks if he should head out now, and the other tells him to just grab his clothes so they can depart, while a guard captain watches nearby, wondering if they really found the right man so easily. The captain announces to the Lord that he's brought the barbarian. The Lord tells them to come in. He introduces himself as Luke Barkin, Lord of the territory. Ketel shakes his hand, greeting him respectfully as the lawful Lord of Barkin territory. Ketel introduces himself as the barbarian, Ketel, and bows his head. The captain is stunned, unable to believe the barbarian is actually bowing. The Lord muses to himself that barbarians never bow, since to them strength is everything, but living long enough, he supposes, lets you see it all. He invites Ketel to have a seat. Taking in the room, Ketel marvels to himself that this must be what a lord's castle looks like. He notes that even in a fantasy world, castles still feel medieval, then pauses, caught by something. His eyes land on a knight standing guard beside the Lord. Ketel recalls playing knight games as a kid and never expecting to see a real one, thinking to himself how cool it looks, just like he imagined. Without warning, the knight tenses up, wary of Ketel even though he's just sitting there calmly. Ketel's eyes glow as he reacts, quietly noting how bold it is to show bloodlust in front of the Lord. The knight sneers, calling him a foolish wretch who won't leave here alive. The Lord interjects calmly, saying there are a few things he wants to verify. He asks Ketel directly where he came from. Ketel answers plainly, the white snowfield. The Lord stares at him, struck by the realization that the barbarian of legend is truly standing before him now. The Lord tells him he speaks of things hard to believe. Ketel shrugs it off, saying it was a miserable place. Whether the Lord believes him or not is his own choice. The Lord decides to rephrase the question instead. He asks directly, how strong are you? Ketel tells him that's the wrong question, since he doesn't even know the general level of strength in this land. The Lord simply takes that in with an I see. He proposes a spar with his knight instead. Ketel grins, saying that sounds good to him. Word spreads through the castle, and soon a crowd gathers around the arena as Ketel and the knight make their way out to face each other. The Lord gives the signal to begin, adding that he hopes it doesn't turn bloody. A guard rings the starting bell, marking the true start of the duel. The knight tells Ketel to consider it an honor for a barbarian to witness his swordsmanship. Ketel smirks back, saying he'd prefer that outcome too. Now then, the knight taunts, asking what the barbarian plans to do. Streaks of green light tear through the air toward Keatle, closing in fast. Keatle's eyes go wide with shock as he realizes 3 strikes are coming at him all at once. Watching from the crowd, Keatle's party members freeze, realizing that what they're seeing isn't some trick of the eye. The attack bearing down is very real. The knight sneers, taunting that the best Keatle seems able to do is barely dodge his attacks. Keatle decides he's seen enough. He surges forward and drives a devastating punch straight into the knight. Lord Barkin startles, caught completely off guard by what he's just witnessed. Keatle stands over the knight, having sent him crashing to the ground. The knight groans in pain, sprawled out, and clearly finished. The force of the blow leaves a deep crater gouged into the arena floor. Lord Barkin murmurs in disbelief that a top-tier knight was just taken down in a single blow, wondering what kind of monstrous power this is, then admits to himself that this is likely just the minimum of it, and that a barbarian with this much power could easily upset the balance of the world. The Lord decides what he's just seen needs to be reported to his master. Back with Lord Barkin, he reflects that the man he's sending word to is one of the few in the world to hold the title of Sword Master, due to arrive soon, and wonders if this news will catch his interest. A voice cuts in, asking if it's really his interest being spoken of. The Sword Master arrives in a flash of light, an elderly, gray-haired man whose sudden appearance catches everyone off guard. He tells Lord Barkin that his hobbies are as distasteful as ever. Lord Barkin chuckles, replying that a man's got to have a little fun somehow. The Sword Master, introduced as Cain, asks if Barkin is finally going to tell him about the matter that's supposed to interest him. A servant bows deeply, calling it an honor to have him visit on such short notice and addressing him as the great Sword Master, while the gathered household greets him together as Lord Cain. Elsewhere, Lord Barkin looks down at someone lying before him, asking how they're feeling. The knight winces, telling his lord he'll be fine in a few days and apologizing for his defeat. A voice cuts in, saying it is he, not the knight, who owes the apology. Cain reveals himself as the speaker, remarking that his foolish student was defeated by some no-name barbarian, leaving the knight stunned to see his master standing there. Cain tells Lord Barkin that Keatle isn't just some mindless barbarian, but someone who can control his power with real precision, privately concluding the man must be at least superhuman. Barkin hesitates, then asks if it would be rude to ask how Keatle compares to Cain himself. Cain allows that Keatle may be quite strong, but insists that as a sword master, even superhuman strength wouldn't be enough to match him. Barkin, stunned, wonders aloud whether this is really the power of a barbarian from the White Wasteland, calling it impossible through normal means. He admits he hadn't believed it himself at first, but asks if it's really true that Keatle came from the White Steppes. A vision surfaces of Keatle alone in the frozen wasteland, spoken of as a legendary being, with a voice questioning whether he's even human at all. Cain strokes his beard, murmuring that Keatle is something else entirely. He catches himself, muttering that no, that can't be it, which leaves Barkin puzzled and unsure what he means. Barkin presses again, asking if something is wrong. Cain waves it off, calling it nothing, a matter for another time, before trailing into a mutter about the Emperor. He tells Barkin not to worry about it for now, leaving Barkin uncertain but willing to let it go. Cain asks whether the barbarian is in the domain right now, and Barkin confirms Keatle said he'd be staying. Cain decides he'll have to see for himself. Outside, the knight walks beside Keatle, asking what he plans to do now. Keatle glances back at him without much of an answer, admitting he isn't sure yet. The knight hands over a pouch of gold as the reward for winning the duel, while back inside the manor, the lord who challenged him earlier declares that from now on he won't interfere in whatever Keatle does within the territory. Keatle admits he doesn't have anything specific planned, though the knight points out it would help him to have some kind of official status. The knight explains that one way is to find someone of high standing to sponsor him and vouch for his identity, or, Keatle asks, or? The knight tells him he could become a mercenary. He adds that mercenaries who haven't reached a certain rank are treated as little more than errand boys, so with Keatle's strength, finding a proper sponsor would honestly be the smarter route. Keatle, intrigued, asks if there's really a path like that. A mercenary, the knight explains, is simply someone who takes on requests to hunt monsters. Keatle asks where he should go to become one. The knight tells him there's a guild hall in town. Keatle asks him to lead the way. Caught off guard by how easily he agrees, the knight stammers out a yes. Soon after, Keatle stands before the guild hall, taking in the building. A passerby spots him and freezes, whispering in disbelief that a barbarian just walked into town. Inside, Keatle announces that he's come to become a mercenary. The young receptionist behind the desk flusters, asking him to confirm that he really wants to become a mercenary, and why. Keatle explains he's heard that working as a mercenary can get his status officially recognized. She agrees that's true, but warns he'll need to rack up plenty of accomplishments first, and asks if he's fine with that. He says he is, so she agrees to register him for 5 copper coins and asks for his name and age. He gives his name as Keatle, adding that he isn't sure of his own age. With the registration complete, she hands him his mercenary badge, warning him not to lose it since it represents his status. Satisfied, Keatle simply says that's good. He asks what kind of requests are available. Surprised he wants to start right away, the receptionist asks him to clarify what he means by requests. She lays out the jobs currently open to him. Keatle stares at the short list, unable to believe that's really all there is. Nervous, she starts to explain that as a freshly registered F-rank mercenary, these are the only jobs available to him, all while privately panicking that barbarians are supposedly proud and wondering if he's about to lash out. She adds that if he starts with simple jobs and builds up his record, he'll eventually qualify for harder missions. Keatle decides right there that he'll take one of them. The request he picks turns out to be for gathering herbs. He asks where he can find them. She tells him they grow just outside the village and shows him a reference sketch of what they look like. Watching him take it in stride, she can't help but think he's surprisingly calm about it. Keatle heads into the forest outside the village, comparing the sketch to the red flowers growing all around him. He mutters to himself that the herbs are apparently good for wounds, though he thinks they look a bit strange. Kitted out with a wide sun hat and UV protection gear, he declares he's ready to begin his first job as a mercenary. About an hour later, back at the guild hall, he dumps an enormous sack of herbs onto the floor. He asks if that's enough, leaving the stunned receptionist to squeak out that it's a lot, secretly wondering if he raided the entire herb field. Inspecting them, she notes they're in excellent condition, since most mercenaries tear the herbs out carelessly and ruin their value. Keatle shrugs it off, saying he might not look it, but he's actually quite confident in his delicate touch, leaving her at a loss for words. She thanks him for his hard work and hands over his reward for the request, a single silver coin. Very satisfied, he asks if she can hand him the next request right away, leaving her stunned that anyone could be happy with such a small reward. He explains the sun's still high, so he'd like to get as much work done as he can while there's daylight left. Left alone, she mutters that this new mercenary is a weirdo too, remembering how her mother always said every new mercenary who came through was a weirdo. Keatle looks over the request board and decides he'll go with this one this time, with herb gathering, basement cleaning, and sewer cleanup already checked off above it. Watching him work through the list, Rosa mutters to herself that after herb gathering, this is already the 3rd cleaning task he's picked. Keatle wonders, half to himself, whether the barbarian actually likes cleaning. Flustered, Rosa stammers that she'll go ahead and accept the request for him. Nearby, someone watches him quietly from beneath a pale hood, saying nothing. At the warehouse, Keatle announces that he's there to clean the place. The warehouse owner, gripping a broom like a weapon, demands to know if he's the one in charge of the warehouse, and when he answers with a hesitant yes, she recoils, gasping that he's a barbarian. The next job on his list is street cleaning, so he picks up a broom and gets to sweeping. Controlling his strength is tricky at first, but he manages without any real trouble. He straightens up afterward, looking rather pleased with himself. Off to the side, an old man peers through a pair of binoculars, muttering to himself about what in the world the man is doing. He keeps watching, thinking that this man is clearly at least superhuman, someone strong enough to shake an entire kingdom if he ever wanted to, and that just by revealing power like that, he could be honored anywhere he went. And yet here he is, the old man thinks, a barbarian who could solve anything by force, doing menial chores instead. Somewhere else, birds chirp in their nest as a hand curls slowly into a fist, and a low groan slips out. Keatle reacts with surprise at a market stall. Someone hands over his reward, telling him he did good work for his first day as a mercenary, and that this covers all 15 requests he finished. His eyes flick up, sharp and alert. He decides it's time to begin his second day in civilization. Something catches his attention and he trails off mid-thought, saying that's. Standing before the building, he realizes it's a library. Wrapped in shadow, Keatle asks if it would be all right for him to read some books, and the librarian lets out a startled shriek. He settles in to read anyway, flipping through a book while she watches him from across the room without a word. Outside, the old man senses him nearby and can't help but think that a barbarian, known for being brutish and ignorant, is somehow sitting there reading. The book in Keatle's hands turns out to be titled History. Deciding that's enough about human affairs, he figures it's time to look into something more interesting. He picks up a book titled Non-Human, curious what it has to say about the other races. Skimming through it, he realizes it's a whole book compiling different non-human creatures. The librarian tells him that's about all the information they have on hand. He thanks her, saying it was very helpful, and she brightens up, assuring him it was no trouble at all. Back at the guild hall, he asks Rosa what kind of requests are available today, and she jumps, stammering that he's here already. Watching from a distance, the old man decides he really is strange, and that he'll just have to confront him directly. Night settles over the town under a full moon. Keatle figures he handled another dozen or so requests today. Walking home through the empty streets, he thinks that at this pace, the day he's finally acknowledged as a true mercenary won't be far off. A sudden sound stops him mid-step, and he turns just as a hooded figure appears out of nowhere in a strange burst of light. The stranger closes in from behind him. Startled that he's been noticed, the old man lets out a stiff what, and Keatle turns to ask flatly what he wants. The old man thinks to himself that he definitely suppressed his presence completely, that detecting him should have been impossible no matter how sharp someone's senses were. Getting no answer, Keatle figures he's right. Security here seems decent enough, but there are apparently still bandits around. The old man wonders, half to himself, whether the young man would even believe him if he said he was a sword master. Keatle needles him anyway, asking if he's still resorting to robbery at that age, and figuring the economy must be in a worse state than he thought. He decides taking the man down and turning him in would make for a good record. Actually, he realizes this might be a good opportunity, since the old man clearly thinks he's a bandit. The old man, for his part, decides that engaging him directly might be the best way to gauge his strength and identity, and his fist glows faintly as he readies himself. Power gathers around him for a moment. Then his eyes go wide as Keatle simply vanishes from where he was standing. Keatle reappears right behind him, and the old man jumps, blurting out what. He realizes with a jolt that Keatle is about to grab him by the back of the neck, but all Keatle says is not bad as a green blade of energy slices past. The old man barely dodges clear, muttering that there's no way that just happened. He almost got me, the old man thinks, adding that if his reflexes had been even slightly slower, he'd have been caught. But more shocking than that. Interesting, Keatle says aloud, privately wondering how the man moved that fast with nothing but a pure human body. Forget testing, the old man decides. This is real now. He commits fully, declaring that he's going all in. Keatle's eyes flash purple as he reacts, and the old man freezes in shock, unable to believe that even with his perception expanded, he still couldn't react in time. Keatle's hand closes around his wrist, and the old man cries out, realizing this is no ordinary grab. It feels like having his arm jammed straight into solid rock with his whole body dragged along behind it, and he screams. What is this strength, he thinks? It isn't even a competition in terms of raw power. In that case, he decides, he'll go full force. He launches a full-force strike. Keatle braces himself, and the exchange lands hard between them. Left breathless and spent, the old man can only listen as Keatle remarks that bandits these days sure have all kinds of techniques, leaving him wondering why he's still being mistaken for one. He realizes what he's looking at is manifested mana, a level only the most elite can reach, and that Keatle has cloaked his whole body in it. Keatle, meanwhile, thinks to himself that the old man truly does seem to believe he's a thief. The old man reflects that he'd reflexively manifested his own mana, which can shred through solid steel with ease. A human body should have been obliterated just from the contact. And yet, he realizes Keatle doesn't even have a scratch on him. He wonders just what kind of body this man has. Shaken, he demands to know whether Keatle can really endure manifested mana barehanded, and admits he has no idea what kind of trick is being used against him. Keatle steps closer and tells him he thinks it's about time to wrap this up. He stops the old man's blade cold with a single raised finger, and the tension between them draws taut. The blade shudders helplessly under his fingertip. Keatle's eyes glow as he readies himself to finish it, and the old man realizes with dread that this is the end. The finishing blow lands, and all Keatle says afterward is a quiet HM. The old man ends up knocked out cold on the ground, and Keatle concludes that apparently, this is what counts as a bandit in a fantasy world. A guard freezes at the sight, stammering out that this is the Barbarian, and wondering what on earth is happening. Keatle walks through the street dragging the old man along by the collar, and the bystanders, including a red-haired knight, stare in confusion, wondering why Swordmaster Kane is here, of all people. The old man stays locked in grim silence, and the knight asks if the Barbarian really attacked Sir Kane, and what's supposed to happen now. Keatle answers simply that he's caught a bandit. Grinning, he adds that if he hands the man over to the guards, it should count toward his mercenary record. Narration explains that this man has reached the highest level of superhuman skill. He is Swordmaster Kane. And that very man is now being dragged along by a barbarian, in the most humiliating position imaginable. Someone stammers that the man isn't a bandit at all. Keatle asks if he knows him, then figures the man must be an accomplice. The knight bows deeply, saying he pays his respects to Sword Master Cain, the only sword master in the kingdom of Gehentra. Keto blinks, caught off guard. He insists it's impossible, that the man is a bandit who attacked him to steal his silver coins. The knight shakes his head, saying there's no way he'd mistake that face. So could this really be a mage using illusion magic instead? Keto reasons to himself that if this man were skilled enough as a mage to pull that off, he'd already be as respected as a sword master anyway. So maybe sword master is just a fancy title for bandits. The knight asks again if he's really a true sword master, and Cain confirms that he is. The knight says he'll have to report this to the Lord. The Lord reacts with shock, demanding to know what happened. Did Sir Cain really lose? Keto apologizes, saying he should have let the man explain himself. Cain replies that he's to blame too, for staying silent instead of speaking up. The two of them sit in silence, facing each other across a small table, before the Lord muses that of course even among superhumans there are levels, and since Sir Cain only recently became a sword master, he's likely still on the lower end. Still, the Lord goes on. A sword master is one who has earned the noble title Master of the Sword, and the Barbarian beat such a person, which makes him a completely unmanageable being. His head throbbing, the Lord decides there's clearly been a misunderstanding, so he'll excuse himself and let the two of them talk things through. Alone with his tea, Cain admits to himself how humiliating this is, and yet he can't even argue, since it was a perfect defeat. His pride isn't just hurt, it's in tatters like a used rag. Setting his cup down, he says it's time he properly introduces himself. He is Sword Master Cain. Keto asks if Sword Master is his surname, and Cain explains that once someone reaches the state of a sword master, human surnames become meaningless. Keto takes that in, then asks about the trick Cain showed him earlier. Was that a swordmaster's technique? Cain raises his hand, letting a faint green light gather around his fingers, and asks if he means this. He admits that at first he wrote it off as some kind of bandit's trick and didn't think much of it, but now that he knows it's a swordmaster's skill, he's interested. He explains that this is the embodiment of the arcane, also called aura. Startled, Keto realizes that must be what hit him back then. Excited, he asks how he can learn to use it. Cain says that, basically, he'd have to manifest it by learning to control the arcane. Keto tilts his head and asks if the arcane is something like mana. Cain explains that the arcane refers to mystical energy itself. Used as aura, it makes a swordsman. Used as mana, it makes a mage. Keto puts it together, so both swordsmen and mages are drawing on the same underlying force called the arcane. He asks, plainly, if Cain would be willing to teach him that skill. Caught off guard, Cain admits that embarrassingly, he's still learning himself and lacking in knowledge. Undeterred, Keto asks again, sincerely, please, teach him. Cain hesitates, asking if he really needs his guidance at all, since surely he's stronger than him anyway. Cain adds that he doesn't really understand the arcane or swordsmanship himself. He just swings blindly. That's all. Leaving Keto stunned into a hesitant, really? Cain straightens and declares that very well. He is a sword master who wields the sword, and without it, he's but half a man. Keto figures as much, remarking that no wonder Cain was so weak. It was because he wasn't using his sword. Cain admits, a little sheepishly, that yeah, that's exactly it. Keto presses further, saying it seemed off that someone could be called a sword master with only that level of strength, while Cain privately fumes at this little bastard. Keto adds that if he'd used his sword, he might actually have won, leaving Cain to wonder to himself if he really could win just by using a sword. Grinning, Keto says he's looking forward to it, while Cain quietly hopes his self-esteem will recover from all this. Cain recalls that before his regression, he'd already learned swordsmanship, but this is something else entirely. Real fantasy swordsmanship, a strange kind that manipulates the arcane as aura. Cain explains that the key trait of his swordsmanship is the embodiment of illusion and reality, then asks what Keto saw when he fought his disciple. Startled, Keto asks if that knight really was his disciple, then recalls that the knight's sword strike had split into 3, and all 3 were real attacks. Keto figures it's a technique based more on skill than raw strength. Cain simply confirms he's correct. Cain explains that swordsmanship is the art of merging sword and aura to wield the arcane, and that whoever reaches the end of that path becomes a swordmaster. Admitting that embodiment of illusion and reality sounds a bit abstract, and muttering to himself that he's really teaching swordsmanship to a barbarian, Cain decides to just show him directly and lunges into a devastating strike. The blade explodes outward, splitting into 5 distinct strikes, leaving Keto stunned at how a single strike could divide like that. Cain says that giving those illusions actual substance is something only his swordsmanship can achieve. Keatle asks about the technique Kane showed him earlier, wondering if it's truly an arcane technique. Kane confirms it is, and asks what he thinks. Kane reflects that he devoted his entire life to the sword, combining natural talent with grueling effort, and that he barely reached this level of swordsmanship through all that. There's no way someone could. Keatle hefts an axe instead, leaving Kane stunned. An axe? Keatle's axe flashes through the air in a blur of strikes, and Kane, shaken, wonders about that sword strike, realizing Keatle just moved fast through raw brute strength. Keatle reasons that as long as the result is similar, isn't that enough? Leaving Kane flustered, stammering a weak WL. Kane admits to himself that Keatle isn't wrong, even as it stings his pride badly. Kane launches into a full flurry of aura-infused strikes, his blade flashing again and again in a storm of green light. The dust settles over the massive crater the clash has carved into the ground, the two of them standing amid the wreckage. Kane explains that this, bodily separation, is something only achieved through extreme mastery of aura. The onslaught continues, more strikes tearing through the air and gouging deep scars into the earth. The attack detonates in a final burst, and Kane asks, simply, what Keatle thinks of it. Keatle stands amid the wreckage completely unfazed, while Kane collapses to his knees, trembling and silently screaming. Kane sobs that his swords, his precious swords, while Keatle looks on, confused. Keatle remarks, unimpressed, that Kane seems more mentally fragile than he thought. Gritting his teeth, Kane admits that Keatle's swordsmanship is remarkable. Keatle shrugs it off, saying he merely swung his axe quickly. It wasn't true swordsmanship. Kane insists that the technique Keatle showed wasn't a mere afterimage, but real swordsmanship. Yet he admits he himself still can't reach true arcane mastery. Startled, Keatle stammers that that's right. His swordsmanship is still valuable and unleashes another strike embodying illusion and reality as substance, something only he can do. Kane snaps that the problem isn't with his technique at all, that Barbarian is simply a lunatic, moving so fast he becomes a blur without even using aura, which isn't something a human should be capable of. Kane apologizes for letting his emotions get the better of him. Keatle says he understands. Kane explains that to control aura, one must first comprehend the arcane. No mage, swordsman, or which can reach the higher realm without awakening it, except those who believe in gods. Keatle asks if divine power is a separate thing, then. Kane explains that the miracles of the faithful come directly from their gods, unrelated to individual ability. He continues that the arcane means exactly that, the mysterious power within oneself, and that how one wields that power determines everything. So to use aura, gain mana, or control spirits, the foundation of all fantasy powers starts with understanding this arcane. The most basic of those is arcane perception, the stage of knowing, awakening to, and sensing the arcane. Keatle asks if not just anyone can sense the arcane. Kane confirms that unless one has talent, they can't even feel it. Those who can sense the arcane, Kane explains, are called third class. The ability to handle the arcane is divided into 5 grades, and third class is the very first level. Commonly, they're divided as third class, second class, first class, superhuman, and hero. These are the 5 broad categories. Kane adds that it's just a convenient classification, since there are huge differences even within a class and the boundaries aren't always clear, but it's worth knowing the concept exists. The first step of the arcane, he finishes, is arcane perception. Kane guides Keatle through a quiet meditation, urging him to awaken a perception he's never known, to feel the wind, the earth, and the presence waiting within it all. Keatle admits he doesn't feel anything at all. Startled, Kane admits he expected someone this strong to sense it with ease. It's not a hard rule, he explains, but strength usually helps. Keatle seems to be the exception. Puzzled, he wonders if it's just some peculiarity of the White Wasteland. Keatle says he wouldn't know. No one back home ever sensed anything like the arcane. Kane admits it isn't easy for most people either, and offers to channel energy directly into him instead. He tells Keatle to ready himself. Keatle, sweating nervously, agrees. Kane rests a hand on his shoulder, telling him to feel the mana flowing in. The instant he touches him, Kane freezes, stunned, muttering that Keatle surely can't be human. His muscle feels like solid stone. Kane's still marveling when Keatle calls his name. Catching himself, Kane apologizes, admitting his mind wandered. He starts the aura flow, explaining the goal is simply to awaken the arcane path inside Keatle, normally not hard to find. Midway through, he pauses with a puzzled hum, then reacts in open surprise. Kane admits he can't find the arcane path inside Keatle's body, or more precisely, he can't even reach it. He finishes, while Keatle sits there grinning, enjoying the contact. However far he pushes his aura in, it touches nothing, like swimming through a bottomless abyss, more like being crushed under the deep. He corrects, and flatly concludes it won't work. Alarmed, Keatle asks if that means he lacks the talent. That's not it, Kane says. Channeling aura into him directly just isn't enough on its own. Keatle has to find the path himself and awaken the dormant force within, as a faint green light stirs in his chest. He couldn't find Keatle's path at all, Kane admits. Stunned, Keatle presses him further. Does that mean he can't sense the arcane at all? Not that either, Kane clarifies. He couldn't even confirm a path exists inside him. Kane admits that Keatle's body itself feels unnatural. Aura has to reach deep to find the path, he explains, but Keatle's too dense to push into. He's never seen anything like it, and wonders if raw physicality is blocking it. Sighing, Keatle asks if that means he'll never gain the arcane at all. Kane says it's hard to say either way. Still, he suggests a sword master more skilled with aura, or the mage tower instead. Kane apologizes regardless. Keatle tells him it's fine. To himself, Keatle decides there's still a chance, and that's enough for now. He thanks Kane for teaching him so much. Kane only answers with a heavy, wordless silence. Every barbarian Kane's ever met was uncontrollable, looting, drinking, living for violence until cast out. This one, he thinks, is different. Snapping back, he asks if Keatle would ever consider joining the kingdom. Confused, Keatle asks what he means. Kane clarifies, pledging loyalty in exchange for rank. With his strength he could rise high, Kane says, offering to sponsor him personally. Keatle calls it interesting, but refuses outright, saying he doesn't want to be tied down. In his deep conscience, a voice murmurs within Kane. He might shake off the Empire's control. Kane presses once more. Surely noble rank tempts him? Keatle only hums, non-committal. He'd rather enjoy his own freedom instead, he finally says. Taken aback, Kane stammers his understanding. Keatle thanks him again regardless, promising he won't forget his kindness. Alone after, Kane admits he was being ridiculous to think he could control the barbarian, even briefly. The man acts on his own will alone. Not knowing what he's really thinking, Kane muses, might make him more dangerous than any other barbarian, perhaps something out of the demon realm. After Keatle was gone, Kane murmurs uneasily about conquering the demon realm, wondering what the Emperor could possibly be thinking. At a long table, a noble demands to know if his colleague is serious, since people are dying for mere reconnaissance. Dead serious, comes the reply. Maybe the Emperor believes himself some reborn emperor from ages past. Either way, the Kane adds, it's a matter for the future. They haven't even finished conquering the rest of humanity's domain yet, the noble points out. The other only answers with silence. This land's still part of the Empire, he reminds him, and they could be summoned any time. Best stay prepared. Left alone, he sighs. The world's already a mess, and now the Emperor's gone half-mad on top of it. Emperor startles upright, wondering if the rumors are true. Yeah, comes the grim reply. The demons have started to move. Dungeon outbreaks aren't behaving normally either. The voice continues. Some say the demon realm's taint is leaking into the world itself, shadow-wreathed beasts looming in the dark. Something is happening. A demonic figure declares from the swirling purple haze, and whatever it is, it bodes ill for humanity. Then again, perhaps the strangest thing of all is already walking among them. Back at the table, Kane asks what the Emperor thinks. He admits he doesn't know. At the last of their conversation, the Emperor states, the barbarian isn't an enemy, but beyond that, he can't say. Keatle strolls through the city streets in his usual beast-hide gear, the fur collar and bare, scarred muscle drawing more than a few uneasy glances from passers-by. A mother notices him coming and pulls her child close against her side, watching him warily as he passes. Another passerby flinches at the sight of him and hurries out of his way without a word. Puzzled by all the stares, Keatle wonders quietly to himself if people are scared of him because of his clothes. He reasons it's probably because he isn't wearing anything proper. A beast-hide vest is fine and all, he supposes, but it hardly screams civilized to anyone watching. Decided, he throws a fist in the air and declares he'll go buy some civilized clothing. A tailor freezes mid-task, visibly startled, the moment Keatle's massive frame fills the doorway. Keatle tells him plainly, without any fuss, that he'd like to buy some clothes. Sweating and flustered, the tailor admits he honestly doesn't think they have anything in his size. Keatle hums thoughtfully, calling that troublesome, and asks if there's really no way around it. The tailor timidly offers to take a custom order instead, if he's willing to wait. Delighted by that, Keatle brightens and says that's a fine option, asking him to please go ahead and do just that. Left alone afterward, the tailor imagines Keatle erupting into a fiery rage over an unsatisfactory finished garment. and wonders in genuine terror whether he'd even survive an outburst like that. Later, after giving his order to the tailor, Keatle notices something small and unfamiliar resting on the road to the guild hall. He turns the little gemstone over between his fingers, wondering aloud what exactly it is. Shrugging, he decides he'll just ask the guild hall about it instead of puzzling over it himself. At the counter, receptionist Rosa leans in and asks if he even knows what the thing sitting in his palm is. Keatle explains he simply picked it up on the way here, studying it. Rosa remarks it doesn't look like any ordinary orb to her. She notes that its surface is unusually smooth, as though it's been carefully carved or worked on by someone. Quietly, almost to herself, she wonders why it would feel like it carries some kind of hidden value. Her eyes stay fixed on the little orb, unblinking, as if she can't quite look away. Noticing, Keatle asks if she's all right. Startled out of it, Rosa asks what he means. He tells her plainly that she looked entranced by the orb just now. She admits it's genuinely hard to figure out, since it seems to give off some strange energy she can't place, and offers to have it appraised for him properly. Keatle declines with a grin, saying he'd rather investigate it himself, since figuring it out is part of the fun too. Changing the subject entirely, he asks what jobs are available today. Rosa nods and goes to fetch the request form for him. Later, sprawled comfortably at the inn with a reward pouch beside him, Keatle stretches and calls it another fulfilling day. He studies the little orb again in the lamplight, muttering that he seriously wants to know what this thing even is. He recalls how Rosa looked like she was practically losing her mind over it earlier, and wonders idly if it might actually have some kind of function. Suddenly a voice calls out from the orb itself, urging him to come closer. Startled, Keatle demands to know why he just heard a voice from the thing in his hand. Inside his own mind, the voice repeats its call, drawing him nearer. Unsettled, Keatle wonders if it's somehow trying to lead him somewhere. A map suddenly unfurls across his mind, and he wonders aloud whether this could be some kind of domination magic at work. Resigned to it, he sighs and decides he'll just go. Then, since there's clearly no point resisting, Keatle pushes through the dark forest toward the pull of the voice, grumbling that he's already coming and telling it to just shut up already. Something catches his eye ahead, and he stops short, brow furrowing in suspicion. A voice intones from the darkness that another sacrifice has walked in, as chains of pale, glowing light coil slowly around him. It scoffs that this time it's just some dumb barbarian, though at least he's big enough to make a decent offering. A hooded, skeletal figure wreathed in blue flame declares flatly that this makes 10 now. Seated before a glowing altar deep in shadow, the figure murmurs to itself that this must be a dream, wondering aloud whether even resurrection is truly possible. The cold open reveals that behind everything was an evil mage who twisted people's emotions and controlled the minds of countless kings, inciting wars and ruling kingdoms from the shadows. Eventually his crimes caught up with him, and heroes hunted him down. But just before his fall, he'd already transferred his soul into a life vessel, becoming a lich. Now he offers sacrifices to form the mana core he needs for revival. As the core takes shape, he vows to conquer the world again, his goal drawing ever closer. Somewhere in the dark, a voice wonders why a barbarian has wandered in, questioning whether he's meant to be a sacrifice. The territory is remote, chosen because the lich needed to grow his power in secret, far from prying eyes. That's exactly why a barbarian's presence is so unusual, and Keatle looks around, puzzled, sensing something's off. The lich muses that creatures from the north came a long way, and judging by his size, he'll make a fine offering. The orb, it turns out, only lures those unawakened to the arcane, meaning whoever's drawn and knows nothing of magic. That would make Keatle just an ordinary soul, though the lich notes he seems unaffected, chalking it up to a fluke. Stunned, Keatle realizes he's looking at an actual lich, the ultimate fantasy villain, and asks what exactly it is. The lich asks in return whether he wasn't lured by the orb. Spotting the scattered bones, Keatle realizes at once this is how the lich has been luring people here. Baffled, the lich mutters he senses no arcane from him, meaning he must just be an ordinary barbarian. He accuses Keatle of carrying a mental protection artifact at a high-grade one too, powerful enough to block his senses, though he can't imagine how a barbarian got one. He guesses Keatle got lucky, but Keatle flatly says he has nothing like that. The lich snaps that he won't be lied to, warning Keatle could have died painlessly if he'd just fallen under the spell. But now, he growls, he'll crush him by force. He summons 2 skeletons as his minions. One of them lunges at Keatle at once. Keatle figures a dungeon with an evil lich explains a lot, and thinks he's starting to understand what's going on. The skeleton leaps in for a strike. Keatle shatters it with one punch. The lich's eye twitches, caught off guard. Keto remarks it was pretty flimsy, more than he expected. The Lich's jaw clenches in fury. He vows to see if that tongue still works once Ketel's arms and legs are gone. 3 more skeletons rise at his command, and he reminds himself he only needs Ketel alive. Ordered to cut him down, they charge in together. Ketel scoffs and drives his fist forward. He knocks the first attack aside without flinching. The Lich flinches, stunned as it bursts apart, just as he thought. Kazan was right that destroying the head finishes them for good. Ketel figures a Lich should have sent at least a Death Knight, not just skeletons. He asks, almost mockingly, if that's really all he's got. Stung, the Lich drives his staff into himself. Channeling something far greater, he declares he's done playing nice. The crystal flares as power tears through the chamber. A ghostly suit of armor rises at his command. Ketel's eyes narrow, realizing what he's looking at. It's a skeleton knight, and he grins that a Lich-crafted one is a first for him. The Lich orders it to kill him, and it surges forward. Ketel readies his fist to meet it. The knight swings its blade down at him. Someone taunts that they'll see how sturdy he really is. The blow connects and sends him flying. The impact detonates into a massive explosion through the chamber. Dust billows through the haze. The two clash again and again. A cracked skull tumbles free from the smoke. Emerging from the smoke, Ketel grins and admits this one's tougher than the rest. Enraged, the Lich orders it to open its mana to the limit. A massive surge of energy erupts as they collide once more. The knight lets out a final scream as it's torn apart. As the Skeleron pounces towards Ketel with all his mana channels open, it was defeated effortlessly by him. Watching from the shadows, the Lich admits it's unusual, but maybe not so different in the end. Still, he reasons, this must be purely the Barbarian's own raw strength at work. He can hardly believe someone took down a skeleton knight with nothing but physical power, wondering if something like that's even possible, before muttering that Ketel must be something special. Deep in the ruins, a skeletal hand tightens around its staff as the Lich decides he'll deal with the intruder himself. Calling it an honor, he yanks Ketel through the air toward him. The Lich finally faces him directly, warning that trespassing on his sanctuary comes with a price. Ketel shrugs it off, saying he only came because the orb summoned him. Suspicious, the Lich asks if it wasn't him who scattered those very orbs in the first place. It's true. Everyone who ended up here had been lured in by the orbs he'd spread, and the Barbarian was no exception. Emboldened, the Lich launches into a boast, calling himself the great and mighty sorcerer who brought down 5 kingdoms and clashed with heroes, introducing himself with a name far too long to bother remembering. Cardos Bernialis Kessis. Half listening, Ketel can't help thinking back to another long-winded name he once had to memorize, the Elf Queens, and grumbles to himself about a world obsessed with titles longer than 2 lines. Cardos raises his staff and channels a swirling storm of power, ordering Ketel to become the cornerstone of his resurrection. The spell slams into him, and Ketel reacts, caught off guard by the impact. The magic churns around him, and as it settles, his eye flickers strangely, something clearly working its way inside. The curse is explained as one that preys on human emotion, drawing out buried negativity and using it to paralyze and mentally break its victims. A spell Cardos devised himself, nearly unstoppable given how little mana it costs to cast. Confident, Cardos sneers that a mere barbarian who can't even touch the arcane stands no chance against magic of this caliber. Ketel, completely unfazed, simply wonders aloud what he should do next. Cardos notices something is off about him. He doesn't even seem to be wearing any artifacts that could explain his resistance. Deciding not to waste more effort, he opts to just capture Ketel and study him later, ordering the skeletons to take him away. A construct crackles to life at his command and lunges straight for Ketel, blade raised. Ketel plants his feet and steadies himself, his eye glinting as the tension builds. As the skeleton bears down on him, he swings back hard, shattering it apart on contact. The explosion of kicking the skeleton impact rings out, and both Ketel and the Lich react, one startled, the other stunned. Cardos stares in disbelief, unable to understand how. He was certain the mind control spell had worked perfectly. Ketel points out he'd just been standing there watching, and asks if he was planning to trap him with more skeletons again, like before. Unimpressed, he calls it boring. Cardos reminds himself that humans are creatures ruled by emotion, and that no matter how powerful someone is, they all carry some form of negativity buried inside, which is exactly why there's supposedly no way to resist his emotion control magic. Ketel, however, only asks why he doesn't just use something simpler, like a fireball or a magic missile instead. Furious, Cardos snaps that he has no idea how Ketel's even still standing, and demands to know how he dares compare his magic to such low-tier spells. He raises his staff, chanting for something to come forth and for the murky currents to gather. The spell detonates into a massive, formless wave of pure chaos. Cardos declares it will swallow the world and drown all clarity in chaos, ordering it to consume Keatle completely as a skeletal hand reaches out from within the blast. Smoke and debris billow from the explosion, but Keatle simply walks out of the wreckage completely unharmed. Cardos bursts into unhinged laughter, certain that victory is finally his. But his laughter quickly turns into a fit of coughing, blood spilling from his jaw as he slumps forward, spent. Panting, he admits to himself that he overdid it, having burned through nearly all his mana just casting that spell, keeping only the bare minimum to hold his body together. But still, he tells himself, surely this should finally have been enough to. Keatle cuts him off simply, calling it impressive. Cardos freezes in disbelief, gasping at the sight of him still standing there. Keatle tilts his head and asks if that's really all he's got. Horrified, Cardos shrieks that even this didn't work. He explains, almost pleading, that he just used the strongest dark spell in his entire arsenal of mind control. Even a great hero struck by it directly should have had their mind shattered completely, he insists, demanding to know what Keatle actually is. Keatle just shrugs, admitting it was impressive, sure, but that he didn't feel anything from it at all. Cardos' eye flares as he warns that if that was the end of Keatle's show. Keatle grips his weapon tightly, ready to answer, and tells him it's his turn now. Keatle shifts the axe against his shoulder, catching himself off guard as something in the dungeon stirs. Cardos looms nearby and remarks that Keatle came here already knowing who he was. Keatle, puzzled, admits that's true, which the figure takes as confirmation. Cardos bursts into cackling laughter, mocking the Empire for hunting him down and vowing he'll rise again, promising to shatter their blades and rule the world once more. A flashback flickers through his mind of Keatle locked in a brutal fistfight, blow after merciless blow landing. He recalls it as a place that raises countless unique talents, muttering that the barbarian in front of him must have come from there. Another memory surfaces, of a blade forged solely to end his life, and an assassin once sent by the Empire to kill him. Even so, he screams, refusing to be silenced by what came before. He introduces himself as Cardos Brangelus Kesses and vows he will kill Keatle and overturn the Empire once and for all. Keatle just tilts his head, privately wondering if the man has completely lost his mind. A shimmering urn materializes out of thin air, swirling with pale light as it's summoned into Cardos' grip. The vessel rockets toward Keatle, who barely has time to react before it's already upon him. A blinding beam slams into him, throwing him backward in a burst of light. Cardos explains that once the ritual is complete, he'll be trapped in that body forever unless he becomes a lich again, but he insists he has no other options left. The possession takes hold, and Cardos gloats that the body is his now, savoring what he believes is victory. Deep inside Keatle's mental realm, the lich's spirit finds itself somewhere unfamiliar, confused by what it's seeing. He realizes this must be the barbarian's inner world, admitting he's never witnessed anything like it, and sensing something is deeply wrong, since merely perceiving this place is starting to corrupt and unravel his own mind. A banner catches his eye, and dread creeps in as he wonders whether this could somehow be the Empire's doing. Racked with agony, he insists over and over that it isn't the Empire, until Keatle's own will violently shoves him back out, retorting that even the Empire couldn't have built something like this. Cardos' spirit is expelled entirely, sputtering his last words in disbelief before fading, while Keatle, baffled by the whole ordeal, can only mutter what the heck just happened. He shrugs it off, deciding the whole thing was kind of cool, but ultimately nothing more than that, then muses that a lich is supposed to be a mage's final evolution and admits he was curious what kind of magic the man would have used. He figures liches in this world must not be all that impressive after all, then reminds himself that since he's cleared the dungeon, he should go claim his reward. Something catches his eye. The vessel glowed whenever Cardos cast his spells. He wonders aloud whether holding it might let him cast spells too. Something clicks in his mind, a small jolt of realization. Deciding it's best kept to himself for now, he tucks the staff away with a satisfied grin. Turning the strange jar over in his hands, he wonders if it might actually be some kind of life vessel, given that it once belonged to a lich. He decides the safest bet is to have Rosa take a look and appraise it properly. Confident he's gathered plenty of rewards already, he pauses, sensing something oddly suspicious about the place. A glowing magic circle flares to life in the air above him. He wonders what it could mean, and whether there might be a hidden room somewhere nearby. A chime rings out as the puzzle responds with a resounding correct. The room opens to reveal a group of strangers standing inside what turns out to be Cardos's hidden sacrificial chamber. Bewildered, Keatle can only wonder who in the world these people even are. Nobody was even reacting. They were just dozed off staring at the ground. Sarcastically, Keatle asks if anyone was home to the dozed strangers. He mulls it over for a moment, unsure exactly what he should do with them. Deciding to let it go for now, he decides he'll head back to the estate. He figures that once he explains the situation there, someone will be sent to properly handle it. He returns to find Rosa seated at her desk, hard at work. She looks up and greets him warmly as Lord Keatle. He drops into a seat across from her, mentioning he had a few things to deal with. He brings up the orb he'd shown her the day before, and she laughs it off, certain he must be joking. He insists he isn't, and she balks, pointing out that a lich, one of only 5 in the entire world, showing up somewhere as backwater, as this seems impossible. He holds out the jar as proof. He explains he brought back something that looks like the lich's life vessel and asks if she thinks she can appraise it. She freezes mid-sentence, visibly stunned. Her eyes go wide as the full weight of what he's holding starts to sink in. Rosa reacts in deep shock, wondering aloud what's going on here. He explains casually that he thought about bringing the mindless victims out, but left them since their minds were already gone, adding that the guild should probably send someone to check on it. Rosa, stunned, can only ask him to repeat himself. She recalls that there have been several disappearance cases in the territory lately with no one ever found, and realizes with dawning horror what it would mean if those really were the work of a lich. She bolts upright, telling him to wait just a moment while she calls for someone immediately. The guard reacts explosively, demanding to know what's going on and whether she really just said a lich. Caught off guard by his sudden appearance, Keatle greets him with an awkward, simple hello. He brushes the whole thing off, insisting it's all been taken care of and wasn't a big deal, which only leaves Rosa more confused about what exactly he means. Sweating, the guard tries to recall the name, asking if it was Cardos Bernailas Kessis. Keatle asks if he actually knows the name, and the flustered guard insists that of course he does. A grim history unfolds. Cardos Bernailas Kessis, the sorcerer who flipped the world upside down over a century ago, creator of magic that manipulates emotion and sows endless chaos, the man who drove kings mad and brought ruin to 5 kingdoms. That very being had been here, as a lich. The captain can barely bring himself to ask if it's really true. Keatle shrugs, saying the man wasn't all that impressive, just doing strange things on his own before ending up self-destructing, leaving the captain speechless. The guard protests that it's absurd, that a mage of Cardos's caliber simply self-destructing makes no sense, and presses for a more detailed explanation. Keatle admits that even if he says that, there's really not much more he can tell him. The guard tells him to wait there a moment. Lord Luke Varkin reacts in disbelief, stunned that a lich could have been operating right next to his territory. He questions whether they're even sure it was a lich, wondering if it could have been some other kind of monster instead. The guard explains that based on the testimonies of the rescued victims, that seems unlikely, and that they also have physical proof, the phylactery itself. He grows visibly uneasy, noting that a lich of that caliber hiding near the estate unnoticed means the Empire could dispatch investigators any moment, which is especially troubling with Lord Kane currently away. Varkin admits this is turning into a real headache. The guard answers with a simple yes, my lord, and Varkin allows that still, perhaps they got lucky. He adds that if the Barbarian hadn't found it first, they might have been the first victims themselves, since Cardos was likely in the midst of preparing his own resurrection as a lich, meaning things clearly weren't in a normal state, which the guard agrees seems probable. Even so, Varkin calls it a remarkable feat and decides they'll need to give a reward fitting of it. Standing at the window, he murmurs that it all depends on whether they can offer something adequate from their own means. The quiet moment is broken as someone comes running through the halls, shouting for the Lord. He perks up, pleased to hear the Barbarian is finally awake, and tells them to let him in. A maid rushes in, panicked, announcing that the Sun God's Inquisitor, Lord Aquaz, has just arrived at the estate. Varkin reacts with alarm, demanding to know what this means and why the Inquisitor is here. The imposing newcomer is revealed as the Inquisitor of the Sun God herself. The two of them settle down together over tea in a lavish parlor. Varkin greets her nervously, calling it an honor and introducing himself as Luke Varkan, Lord of the Varkan estate. She introduces herself in turn as Aquaz, Inquisitor of the Sun God and Judge of Heresy in his name. She is known as the one who beheaded 7 warlocks who had signed pacts with demons and single-handedly disrupted a massive ritual. Currently the most powerful Inquisitor of the Sun God on the continent. Someone whose authority even the Empire defers to, and whose power far exceeds that of a mere provincial lord. She wonders aloud why someone of her stature would even bother making the trip, noting that the estate has been rather noisy lately. Varkin explains there was a small problem in a nearby dungeon, but assures her it's already been resolved. She asks, almost pointedly, whether he's implying her visit has nothing to do with the Lich at all. Before revealing why she's really come, she asks if she might first hear more about what's happened recently at the estate. Varkin chokes slightly, caught off guard, stammering as he tries to figure out how to answer. She asks directly whether he means the Barbarian, the one who supposedly defeated the Lich. He confirms it, admitting it may indeed have been Cardos Bernialis Kessis, which visibly shocks her as she demands confirmation of what he just said. She holds up the jar herself, recognizing it immediately as Cardos's own phylactery. She murmurs to herself, wondering if that Barbarian is really the one behind all this. She presses further, asking whether he's still at the estate even now. Varkin reports that Ketel is still staying in the territory, and Aquaz reacts in disbelief, wondering if it's even possible that a mere Barbarian defeated Cardos. She admits it's possible, since apparently even the formidable Lord Cain was defeated by him. She murmurs to herself that an entirely new kind of power has emerged in this world, and asks which tribe this Barbarian could possibly belong to. Varkin recalls he came from the White Wastelands, which visibly unsettles her as she wonders aloud how a being from the demon realm could possibly be walking free out here, before a darker suspicion creeps in. Maybe that Barbarian is the very reason she was sent to this territory in the first place. Composing herself, she asks whether she might be permitted to meet this Barbarian in person. Meanwhile, back at his room, Ketel turns the glowing crystal over in his hands, wondering aloud how he's even supposed to use a thing like this. He figures it must be some kind of artifact that supports magic, and decides it's probably easiest to just ask a mage about it later rather than puzzle it out himself. Glancing toward the window, he realizes it's already about that time and gets up to head out. The guard captain informs him that the Inquisitor of the Sun God has requested a meeting with him at the church. The captain tells him to show proper respect when he meets her, and Ketel, unbothered, tells him not to worry. The captain greets him, telling him he's arrived. Ketel simply says let's be off. Gods of this world are said to bestow power directly and may even descend in person, and the church is where those who serve them gather. Arriving at the towering building, Ketel marvels aloud, realizing this must be the Sun God's church. A group of nuns greets him warmly as Sir Ketel. One of them tells him Inquisitor Aquaz is waiting for him. She introduces herself as Aquaz, Inquisitor of the Sun God. Ketel greets her plainly, introducing himself as Ketel the Barbarian, while a bystander nearby murmurs in surprise at how young the Inquisitor looks. She's caught off guard by his easy smile, privately wondering what it could mean. He asks straightforwardly why she wanted to meet him. She explains it concerns the recent dungeon incident, since Cardos, the very man he claims to have defeated, committed grave atrocities across the entire world in his time. She adds that he eventually became a lich so powerful that only heroes could ever stand against him. But Ketel counters that the Cardos he actually saw was just a lich flailing about on his own before ending up destroying himself. He admits she clearly looks like she doesn't believe him, but says all he can really do is speak to what he actually witnessed with his own eyes. She asks, in that case, whether he would be willing to permit her god to witness their conversation directly, to settle the matter once and for all. She explains that if he speaks a lie in the god's presence, there will be an unmistakable divine reaction, which Ketel likens to a divine lie detector. She privately doubts he'd ever agree to something like that, reasoning that even an unusual barbarian is still fundamentally a barbarian, but tells him aloud that he's free to refuse if it makes him uncomfortable. Ketel, secretly thrilled at the chance to experience divine power himself, tells her it's no trouble at all and says to proceed right away. Startled by his eagerness, she privately notes he looks almost excited and asks if this truly doesn't bother him. He shrugs that he's got nothing to hide, so it wouldn't bother him in the slightest. She agrees to begin, closing her eyes in prayer as she calls on her god, the one who watches from the highest place and oversees the sun itself, asking him to turn his gaze upon the space and reveal any falsehoods within it. Ketel is caught off guard as blinding light washes over him. A presence beyond the light emerges, massive and indescribable in human words. Its very emotion becomes perceptible. Ketel can only blink in confusion, unable to place the feeling at all. The moment passes in silence, leaving Aquaz visibly shaken by whatever just occurred. The god's verdict settles coldly. From now on, within this pillar, nothing false shall be permitted. Ketel simply replies, got it. Ketel answers Aquaz's questions about how he cleared the dungeon, same as before, and once again nothing sets off the god's reaction. Privately, Aquaz reasons that Cardos must have been badly weakened while preparing his resurrection, since if the Lich had still been able to use magic, Ketil wouldn't be sitting in front of her right now, and dismisses the whole thing as him simply getting lucky. Ketil thanks her and apologizes for how the fight must have looked, and she assures him it's fine, admitting she found the encounter interesting too, before asking permission to ask one last, more personal question, which he allows. She asks whether he's truly from the White Wastelands. She murmurs about the demon realm, wondering aloud if he could really be the barbarian from the old emperor's legend. She asks directly why he came to this domain, and he hesitates, caught off guard. He counters by asking whether this whole meeting was really just to confirm if he's some kind of unholy being. He reflects that the god's gaze isn't something that happens for just anyone, let alone something as simple as detecting a lie. It felt like far too much power to use for that alone. Aquaz admits he's right, and Ketil presses further, asking if he was her target from the very beginning. She denies it. She explains that when she first visited the domain, she suspected he might be the subject of a revelation she'd received, but in the end, as he's now seen for himself, that wasn't quite it. She apologizes for hiding her real intentions from him. He shrugs it off, saying he found the whole thing interesting in his own way regardless, then asks if he can ask her one more thing in turn. Their exchange continues in hushed, unclear tones, and by the end both look visibly shaken by whatever just passed between them. Later, alone by a window, Aquaz is approached by a lord who notices she seems troubled. She admits she met him, but it only left her more confused, wondering just what kind of being he really is. She confirms he is indeed a barbarian of the White Wastelands, though she couldn't get any real information about the Wastelands themselves, only that much. The lord worries that if word of this gets out, especially to the emperor, it could throw the world into an uproar, but Aquaz tells him not to worry about that. She explains that they'll handle Cardos on their end and intend to keep the matter of the barbarian quiet as well, which relieves him. He then wonders if all barbarians from the Wastelands are like Ketil, and she doubts it, reasoning that if they were, they'd have already left the Wastelands and conquered the world by now. Elsewhere, two rowdy barbarians are shown drinking and boasting, and the narration notes that even without Ketil there are plenty of barbarians in the world, strong, but foolish, their power fundamentally limited. But Ketil, it's implied, is different. The Lord recalls hearing that the current king of the barbarians is unusual, said to have both strength and intellect. Aquaz confirms she's heard of him too, the king of all barbarians, admitting she's only met him once, but that he was definitely unlike any typical barbarian. The Lord remarks that if those two ever met, it would be quite the spectacle, though Aquaz isn't so sure she'd agree. She adds that the relationship between barbarians and those who serve the gods has never been good, and that a barbarian's growing power is nothing to take lightly. Curious, the Lord asks what exactly was in the divine revelation that made her need to meet Ketil alone. She explains she needed to confirm something. Specifically, whether he was a purely human being, or something merely wearing the shape of one. She begins to explain what the revelation actually showed her, and from the reactions that follow, it's clearly disturbing enough to leave the Lord stunned, muttering that he can't believe what he's just heard. Later, back at the estate, the Lord greets Ketil over tea, asking how he's been. Ketil replies that he's living quite comfortably in the domain thanks to him, then asks straightforwardly why he's been called here this time. The Lord says that, as the domain's ruler, he has something important to tell him. He starts by thanking Ketil properly for saving the domain from the Lich Cardos. He admits that if Cardos had been allowed to act unchecked, the domain would have fallen in an instant, and Ketil simply asks if that's so. Then he apologizes, and when Ketil asks what for, he explains that the truth of Ketil's defeating Cardos can't be made public. He lays out the danger plainly. An achievement like that would be tremendous, but if it ever reached the Emperor's ears, the Emperor might act personally, so it's simply safer for Ketil to give up the glory he's earned. Ketil says he doesn't particularly mind either way, and the Lord adds that, while he wouldn't quite call it an apology, he's prepared a reward for saving the domain. He tells Ketil he'll now present him with the reward set aside by the Lord. Ketil is handed a plain leather pouch and stares at it, unimpressed, asking if it's really just leather. The Lord tells him to look closer. It's no ordinary leather pouch at all. Ketil lifts the plain leather pouch, wondering aloud if this could actually be something special. The Lord explains it's not ordinary leather at all. It's an artifact, a pocket space item roughly the size of the reception room, and even something bigger than the opening can still be pushed inside. Ketil, unconvinced, holds up his war axe, doubting it'll fit from the outside. He shoves it in anyway, and it vanishes into the pouch without resistance, drawing a startled reaction out of him. The pouch flashes, and the Lord confirms this is his reward for saving the territory. Ketil says he likes it and will put it to good use, and the Lord seems glad to see him pleased. Further, talk turns to a troubling oracle. Abnormal creatures are stirring out of the demon realm, and something strange is unfolding in the world. Aquaz warns that a great evil will descend and spread across the world. Back in a quiet village, life goes on as usual until one day a village stops responding. At first nobody thinks much of it, but after days of silence, people are sent to check and never come back. Guards are sent next, and they don't return either. Only then does the Lord realize the seriousness of what's happening. At the guild hall, Rosa announces there's an urgent request from the Lord. Ketel asks what it's about, and she explains it's a check on the village that lost contact, a simple dispatch job, but the reward is unusually large. Ketel likes the sound of it and accepts. Later, in the forest, Ketel shows off his new gear, prompting a surprised reaction about his outfit. He explains he had it made new, since the old set from the wastelands was wearing out. Hayes nearby remarks that the design is unusual, and Ketel proudly says he requested it himself, leaving her impressed. She asks if he also accepted this request, and he confirms it was too interesting to pass up, leaving her thinking he really is unusual. Ketel asks why she came alone, wondering if the rest of her party, Alessandro and Kazan, decided not to show. She figures the request reached them, and they simply turned it down. More participants gather nearby, and someone remarks there are fewer people than expected. Ketel is surprised too. Given the size of the reward, he expected more to show up, but there aren't even 10 in total. Hayes admits the request is honestly a bit dangerous, simple on paper, but the reward is too big, and there's a rumor the guards who went before never came back, which makes it feel far less simple after all. Ketel agrees it's strange that so few showed up when at least 10 should have come. Word of another rumor spreads, and the Hayes reacts nervously while Ketel just laughs it off. A striking figure approaches, and Hayes murmurs uncertainly, wondering if it could be Aqua. The woman is revealed as the Solar God's heretic inquisitor, and word spreads that she'll be accompanying them on this request. Hayes tenses up, since not many mercenaries dare move freely with the heretic inquisitor around, and she nervously hopes the woman isn't about to split her head open. Ketel reassures her that won't happen, since the inquisitor is actually polite and kind, leaving Hayes stunned that he seems to know her personally. Ketel casually confirms it. Of course he knows her, she's a friend. Hayes is floored, unable to believe he's friends with the heretic inquisitor of all people. Ketel greets her warmly, but she flatly says she doesn't recall ever becoming friends with him. He jokes about being found out, then asks why not become friends starting now, leaving her wordless. He clarifies he actually meant Kaloja, and she realizes he already knows, prompting Hayes to ask if the Inquisitor is a priest serving Kaloja, which Ketel shrugs off as no big deal. Aquaz clarifies that Kaloja's followers are currently on a rest period as far as she knows, and that only those in high-ranking positions are able to move at all, hinting at who this newcomer might really be. Hayes waves it off, admitting she doesn't know the inner workings of every order, and it must just be her own misunderstanding. Footsteps approach, and a voice notes that someone has arrived after all. The guard captain and his soldiers step into view. Hayes grows visibly nervous at the reunion playing out in front of her. The guard captain steps forward and formally welcomes everyone who accepted the request. Ketel reflects that everyone being gathered together like this feels just like heading out on a raid. Aqua stands quietly beside him, murmuring to herself, and he glances back, caught briefly off guard by her presence. She admits she can't say for certain, since the god never revealed an exact time. It might be something as simple as a village losing contact. She recalls the god's warning that evil will descend. Hearing a viligant title like Descent of a Great Evil, and Ketel muses over the phrase with a faint, knowing smile. The group reaches the edge of a quiet village, and a soldier hesitates at the sight in front of them. This is the entrance they were looking for. Aqua is asked how it feels, and she answers that she senses nothing at all. A guard reasons the villagers might have simply fled, then orders everyone to spread out and search for tracks, and the group scatters to comply. Every single villager vanished without leaving so much as a trace seems flatly impossible. Cut to an abandoned dinner table, untouched and eerily quiet. A soldier is stunned by what he finds and calls the captain over. There's food. The captain wonders if it was simply left behind during a hurried escape, but quickly realizes that's not it. The food was only just prepared and is still warm, leaving both of them stunned. The captain can't make sense of it. Contact was lost several days ago at the earliest. Many search parties were sent out since then, and not a single one of them returned. Another sweep turns up nothing, no sign of anyone leaving or hiding, and the captain orders the search to continue for now. Elsewhere, there are signs of life everywhere, but no trace of the people themselves, leaving everyone wondering how this could happen. It's the same story in every direction they check. There's proof people were here until just recently, yet not a single person to be found, not a trace anywhere. The captain turns to Aquaz, asking if she knows anything. He asks Ketel the same question. Neither has found any real trace, and neither senses any presence, which only makes the whole thing more maddening. Someone suggests asking the other person who might actually know something. Ketel points out that there's another person here, one who wasn't accounted for. The captain, caught off guard, asks what exactly he means by that. Ketel clarifies, someone who wasn't present when they first entered the village, now that he thinks about it. A mysterious woman is suddenly standing among them, and no one can say when she appeared or who she even is. She reacts with idle amusement, calling the whole situation interesting. Aqua clarifies that's not what she means. Under normal circumstances, no one would even perceive this woman's presence, not even the sun god's inquisitor. Ketel remarks that she doesn't seem to have awakened to mysteries after all. He calls this an unexpected harvest. The captain shouts for everyone to spread out, and the group scrambles to comply. Aqua admits, unsettled, that she can't sense anything from the woman at all. The nun is stunned that the inquisitor of the highest church couldn't detect her, and Aqua concludes it must be one of two things, either something not evil in the slightest, or evil so high-ranking that detection itself is impossible, leaving the nun sighing over the missed chance to see the woman's domain. Without warning, clawed purple fingers lash out toward Ketel. The monstrous woman looms over him with a wicked grin, declaring she'll drag him down to hell as her slave. Without warning, clawed purple fingers burst outward, catching everyone completely off guard. A shockwave of dark energy tears loose around them. Ketel reacts sharply. The nun freezes in terror, and Aqua's fury boils over as she screams, while the guard captain shouts for everyone to hurry and get clear. The mercs who came along started slamming the barrier in fear, screaming for the barrier to open, but nothing gives. Towering above them, the demon declares that no one here can escape. She licks her lips slowly, calling every one of them her prey. Hayes and Ketel are stunned. A demon here? It seems impossible, and yet she confirms it's true, and this one even has a name. Hayes cries out, begging Lord Kaloja to save her. Ketel steadies her, telling her to calm down, promising he's right by her side. He asks what it even means for a demon to carry a name. She starts to explain, trailing off. That is, not every being labeled a demon in this world is genuinely powerful. Most are only fragments of evil and demonic energy, called demons out of convenience. But there exist beings that can rightfully be called true demons, born from the cradle of darkness with no parent and claiming a name entirely of their own will. True demons. Given the shape of her horns, the nun identifies her as a seashore, a demon that surfaced centuries ago, and wonders why such a being would ever emerge in a land this remote. Ketel readies himself, shielding Hayes instinctively. Hayes explains that this ground is already the demon's territory. Unless the demon is defeated, there's no way to lift the barrier around them. Ketel murmurs that he understands, sparks crackling faintly across his fingers. He grins, caught by a sudden thought. He decides to hold back and just watch a little longer, amused, while Hayes looks on in confusion and he laughs at his nerve. And a beat later, Hayes catches on herself. Demons started playing tricks on them, and she taunts back, asking if it was fun and whether it stirred his curiosity for deduction. Hayes realizes the truth. The signs of life left behind in the vanished village were nothing more than the demon's trick, meant only to toy with people, leaving Aqua disgusted at how vile it was. Ketel, munching popcorn with 3D glasses on, watches the whole exchange like a show, leaving Hayes speechless beside him. A named demon's summoning demands a tremendous sacrifice. The lives of one small village would never be enough, and for it to claim a territory without anyone noticing should be utterly impossible. The demon rises higher, and Aquaz demands to know how she could have descended into this world at all, only for her to retort that she'd never actually tell them. Aquaz declares that vile filth dares to defile this land. The demon cackles, mocking the words back at her. Filthy? Defiled? A sider mocks her outright, asking if she really believes her god can save her now. The demon warns her to listen well. The world itself is fracturing, and it no longer belongs to her and her kind alone. Long ago, the gods and humans clashed against evil, and the result was their victory. Evil, defeated, was banished from this world entirely. The demon names herself a seashore, demon of heaviness, and vows to wash away the disgrace of the past and stain the world in evil once more. Aqua spits back, calling her a vile creature, and declares this world belongs only to the gods and to them. She orders the demon to return to her rightful place, channeling her power and commanding it to descend into her instead. A blinding light consumes her as the transformation begins. Just as Ketel predicted, she doesn't attack mid-transformation, and once it completes, She stands fully radiant, armored in gold. A sighter grins, calling it interesting, then good, daring her to fight. Let's do this, God's dog, and Aqua fires back, calling her an insolent thing. The two collide in a violent explosion of light and dark. Aqua screams as the demon's strike lands, and the demon smirks down at her from above. A clawed hand lashes out again, slicing through the air with a sharp, whistling snap. The demon taunts her once more. Even battle must have dignity. Does a hound even know that? Aqua closes the gap fast, her golden strike ringing out sharp and sudden as she surges toward the demon. Ahead of her, a seashell's shadow ripples and reforms in the dark, her eyes narrowing as the blow closes in on her. A sighter murmurs quietly that here it is. Then she bursts fully into her true demonic form, horns curling back, black wings unfurling wide, a wicked spear gleaming in her grip as lightning crackles around her. Aqua freezes for a moment, stunned by the sudden shift, right as a seashell grins down at her, coldly orders her to be crushed, and crashes down with overwhelming force. Aqua barely raises her shield in time, the sheer impact wringing a strained groan out of her. The collision flashes through the street in a blinding flash of gold and violet light. Thrown back, Aqua steadies herself on ground, gritting her teeth and refusing to go down. As she gathers her strength, a seashell praised Aqua as she could read the holy scriptures at such a young age, due to which she was surprised. Aqua started chanting the scriptures, quoted from Karma, chapter 5, verse 59. Its aura, the memory calls it, magnificent beyond words. True to that memory, the power Aqua channels now burns away everything wicked caught in its path. Caught directly in the surge, a seashell is hurled backward through the air. Recovering fast despite the hit, she bares her teeth as Aqua presses the advantage, swinging in again without pause. Aqua's strike comes down hard, aimed straight for the demon. Their weapons meet again in a violent shower of sparks. Another exchange follows immediately, blades flashing back and forth between them. The two glare at each other across their locked weapons, neither one willing to give an inch of ground. The fight tears further into the street, explosions rolling outward with every clash between them. The resulting shockwaves keep tearing through the buildings lining the street around them. Nearby, a mercenary scream cuts through the noise as others cry out for help, right as the fighters collide again overhead. The impact keeps rolling through the already ruined street below. Watching from a safe distance, Hayes turns anxiously to Keatle, asking if he can't do something to help Lady Aquas. He answers simply that he supposes he could, and she perks up at once. Then, he cuts back in, asking flatly why he should interfere and ruin a fight as good as this one. He admits, almost to himself, that he too has a desire to fight a demon someday. When Hayes blinks at him in confusion, he adds that for now he'd honestly rather just watch and observe. Overhead, the clash resumes in full force once more. Both fighters trade blow after blow without slowing down for a second. Neither one lets up, each pressing for any opening they can find. Asisha taunts that she still holds the edge in raw power, and Aqua spits back that it's no surprise, coming from the god's hunting dog. Aqua's next strike lands hard enough to tear a genuinely pained cry out of the demon. Watching closely from below, Keatle notes quietly to himself that the matchup is a bad one for Asisha. In this world, demonic beings simply cannot stand against the divine. Even so, the battle keeps dragging on, with neither side managing to truly break the other. Realizing this herself, Asisha decides she'll need to use another method entirely to seize the win, and lunges back in. Aqua tenses, sensing the sudden shift in her opponent's intent. Mid-motion, Asisha's gaze suddenly cuts towards something else entirely, off in the distance. Nearby, the mercenaries brace themselves as someone among them shouts a warning that it's dangerous. Without warning, Asisha changes course and dives straight for them instead, but Aquas blocks her attack. The impact sends the whole group crashing hard to the ground. Everyone is thrown across the ground, and cries of pain ring out. She snarls at the demon, calling her nothing but a filthy creature. Asisha only laughs at that, her claws twitching with open amusement. She grins wide and asks, almost mockingly, whether Aqua actually expected a demon to fight fair and square. A quiet voice recites a line from Scripture, Material, Chapter 1, Verse 1, and a brilliantly shining golden domain bursts to life around her. The blast tears outward in a deafening flash of light. Amid the glow, Aquas glances back and calls for everyone to take shelter within the light. Two men stumble free of the blast, one gasping his thanks to Lord Aquas. Off to the side, Asisha's lips curl into a fanged grin despite the damage done to her. Overhead, Aqua's strike sends the demon reeling as bystanders scatter below, Someone questions whether it's really alright to use the sacred scripture like that, and she snaps back to shut up before pressing the attack harder. Asishur shudders under the assault, grinning through gritted teeth and purring that this is more like it. Aqua's face hardens with resolve as she bears down again. Asishur staggers back, claws digging into the ground to catch herself. Aqua's weapon screams through the air as she strikes. The blow connects, light slicing clean through the dark energy. Asishur throws up to guard. Hanging upside down in the wreckage, Asishur coldly remarks that death is just death. Face to face with Aqua's, she grins and admits she'd been thinking of at least keeping her alive as a toy. Cut away to Keatle, arms crossed, cheerfully declaring he has no intention of becoming anyone's toy. Asishur's fanged grin fills the frame, sharp and hungry. Blade and dark energy fuses as a violent burst of light and shadow. Standing tall in the aftermath, spear raised, Asishur tells Aqua's she'll just have to die then. Keatle glances back sharply, startled by observing the situation of Aqua's, asking Aqua's if he can fight the demon. Aqua's forces herself upright, declaring flatly that this demon cannot be defeated by him. Keatle adds that he may not look it, but he's quite strong. Aqua's cuts her off with a flat no, saying this isn't a matter of who's stronger. She explains that only divine power can banish a demon from this world. Nothing else can do it. That's been the law since the beginning of time, when evil and gods first existed. Aqua's adds that this is the demon's territory besides, so there's no hoping for a miracle here. Keatle asks if she's saying only a god can stand against a demon. He looks away, murmuring that even if that's true, Aqua's, breathing hard and barely able to stand, insists that as a servant of her god, she has to be the one to do it. Her eye narrows sharply, watching him for his answer. Keatle, surprised by the unwavering will of Aqua's, pats her head and calls it impressive. His boots hit the ground hard as he steps in. Aqua's turns, startled, with a silent question on her face. Keatle grins and admits he's been wanting to fight a demon for a while now. Asishur sneers that he just doesn't get it, telling him flatly that he can't beat her. He smirks back, asking if she wants to test that theory. She licks her lip almost lazily, savoring the moment. She purrs that she wants to see his eyes contort in pain. She hurls him down into a churning violet vortex, slamming him hard against the ground as the dark energy keeps tearing at him. Aqua's cries out no in horror as Asishur grins savagely down at him, his fist clenching and trembling beneath the assault. Gritting through the pain, he pushes back up just as she dives in again, and his fist suddenly cracks straight through her guard. The blow sends her flying backward, blood spraying through the air. In severe shock, Aqua's freezes, who blinks in confusion. Aqua's stares in stunned silence, unable to process what she just saw. Did he really smash the demon's skull with nothing but his fist? The wound floods with light as dark energy churns violently, tearing itself back open in a blinding burst. Asishur rises from the wreckage hole again, glaring down at him and demanding to know what exactly he is. Asishur murmurs that there's no trace of mysticism on him at all. He isn't someone who wields aura or magic, which only makes the whole thing stranger. If that's the case, Asishur says, then she'll just have to check for herself. Dark power spiraling up around her in a churning vortex. Keatle watches the storm build without flinching. She lunges at him grinning, promising through that he's going to die. He studies the strike coming for him calmly instead of bracing against it. It feels awkward, he admits, striking something wearing a human face, but it can't be helped, and his fist drives forward anyway. The blow tears clean through her guard and sends her flying, chains rattling as she's flung backward through the air. She crashes hard, dust and debris scattering around her. The punch was so lethal and strong that it screamed through the streets. Wings flare wide as she tries to right herself mid-fall. The pain finally catches up, and she shrieks, jaw cracking open as dark blood spills from her mouth. She hits the ground skidding, rubble scattering around her. That's impossible, she stammers, staring at him like the words don't belong in her own mouth. But a punch, she repeats, it was just a punch. Keatle's eyes lock, with reloading a punch towards her. He drives forward again, the blow searing bright as it closes the distance. It connects clean, detonating in a wash of orange light. Chains rattle and dark energy churns violently as her body knits itself back together beneath the wings. Keatle glances up sharply, catching the shift in the air before it even fully takes shape. She stands whole again, wings flared wide, the burst of light around her settling into stillness. He notes that when the head breaks, a whole new one apparently just grows in its place. Grinning, he figures that kind of tenacity makes sense for a demon. He wonders aloud whether the core, then, might be somewhere in her head after all. She rises to her full height, chains swaying, and asks if he really believes brute strength alone is enough to fight her. Or, she adds, is he saying he hasn't even needed his full strength against her yet? He blinks, thrown by the question, then simply tells her to listen well. She grins wide and declares herself a seizure, the demon of heaviness. She asks, almost mocking, whether he really thinks he can keep standing against her on raw strength alone. He shrugs it off, telling her it doesn't seem all that impressive to him. She freezes, caught off guard by the answer. Something in her cracks at that, her pride shattering to pieces before the blow even lands. She screams that he's a bastard, and he just blinks back, genuinely confused what set her off. She slings her demonic hammer towards him in fury, but he blocks her attack single-handed. And Keitel's fist drives into her again, sending her rocketing upward in a trail of crackling light. He drives the glowing fist forward, and the impact detonates in a burst of gold light. She's flung through streaks of purple energy, unable to process what just happened. She admits that at full power, she can put the weight of a fortress wall into a single hammer swing. And yet, she says, staring at him, he blocked it barehanded, broke it, even. Another impossible burst tears through the air around them. He stands rooted at the center of it, power visibly surging off his frame. His knuckles tighten, but is ready to destroy. The next exchange detonates in a flash of gold and violet. He's caught square in it, orange fire swallowing him amid the swirling dark energy. Aqua stares, dazed, asking herself what on earth she's even looking at anymore. Centuries ago, a seizure was a mighty demon who single-handedly brought down a kingdom. And yet that same demon now takes a punch square on, his fist glowing orange as it connects. She wipes sweat from her brow, asking if she's really being beaten down by nothing but punches. He straightens over the wreckage, letting out a low, thoughtful hum. His eyes narrow. It truly doesn't die, does it, he thinks. Her mouth curls into a wide grin as Keitel confirms that ordinary physical force alone won't be enough to kill a demon. An overwhelming pressure unlike anything felt before rolls off her, the memory flashing back to the punch that started it all as his fist drives forward through the haze. Something powerful beyond comparison stirs, Asisher chuckling low under her breath as she pins him down with her boot and demands to know just what he really is. He answers simply that he's just a simple barbarian, nothing more. She only smirks wider at that, calling the claim laughable. Still, she admits to herself, she feels refreshed. Dark energy coils and gathers around her as jagged power surges up from the rubble. Still, she decides, there's just one more test she'd like to run. A sudden slash of purple light rips toward Keitel, catching him completely off guard, twisting tendrils of dark power spiraling and thrashing through the air around him. His eye narrows in disbelief as the pressure builds. No way, a voice breathes, as the air fractures and a crackling ball of energy churns and grows before bursting into a massive winged shape, dark power detonating outward in every direction. Barbarian, she breathes, eyes burning as she vows to pierce straight through him with every last ounce of power she has. Keitel hefts his axe now in hand, remarking almost fascinated that so this is what demonic power feels like. Aqua's watching from the sidelines swallows hard, murmuring that this is dangerous. Aqua realizes she can't fight him through sheer physical force alone. But divine power, she thinks, might be another matter entirely. Grinning wide, Asisher commands her thorns to strike and slay, a storm of jagged spikes raining down toward him from every angle as he braces to meet it. A dazzling collision of blue and violet light erupts as his fists tear clean through wave after wave of her onslaught, punching straight through the shredding light towards him. Asisher recoils in horror, demanding to know just what kind of monster he really is. Her eye catches the light bearing down on her, and she murmurs only that so this is it. A blinding golden explosion tears through her, as she was stabbed with the divine axe, wings snapping wide as she screams in agony and crashes down into the rubble below, sparks scattering around her broken body. A faint blue light drifts free from her, streaking away into the night. Keitel dusts himself off with a satisfied grin, admitting that was entertaining at least. Chuckling weakly, she calls being dragged back to hell like this disappointing, but says it wasn't entirely wasted, since she's confirmed something like him exists up here. She asks for his name. He answers simply, Keitel. Aquaz overhears and recoils, gasping out no. A shrieking, delighted laugh rises up, calling out to everyone who dwells in hell to listen. Over an image of a looming dark castle, the voice commands them to remember the name of the barbarian, Keitel. Aquaz collapses, crying out in anguish as the pronouncement washes over her. Countless blood-red eyes unfurl across a writhing mass, Asisher's voice urging them to feast on her memories and claim them. Memories of the being known as Ketel. The eyes multiply and spiral outward, hungry and endless. The chorus of eyes screams as one that the barbarian belongs to them now, from this moment on. Ketel's brow tightens, a strange pressure settling over him unnoticed. Something crackles and bursts deep within him, small red eyes flaring open along his side. He blinks down at himself, bewildered, unable to make sense of what just happened. A cluster of eyes tears open from his chest in a jagged red mark, sudden and alarming. He reaches down and brushes his fingers over the strange mark, more curious than concerned. A dark tendril hisses and dissolves into scattered wisps in the air behind him. Ketel turning his back on it without a second glance as his eyes narrow sharply at something else catching his attention. He blinks, and just like that his sharp expression melts back into an ordinary, slightly dazed look, as if nothing happened at all. Startled, he clutches his chest and asks what that was just now, since it felt like something had actually entered his body, while behind him, a tiny, chibi-sized Asishur reacts with alarm. Chibi Asishur can only stammer in disbelief, unable to understand how, since that darkness should have torn straight through him. He gives a light stretch of his leg, and something crumbles apart at his feet with a faint crackling sound. Elsewhere, a bewildered voice interrupts, and the scene cuts to a shocked elf priestess mid-prayer, her eyes rolled back and tongue lolling from the sheer force of the divine power channeling through her, mirrored beside her by an equally overwhelmed sun god, none in the same trembling state. Back in the ruined street, Ketel throws his arms up in a satisfied, carefree stretch, humming to himself as if he'd just finished a good day's work, the rubble and shattered buildings around him barely registering. A voice concludes simply that the request has been completed. Word spreads in a flurry of letters and reports. First the Lich, and now a demon bearing an actual recorded name, Asishur, leaving a lord to demand in disbelief how a mere barony could be struck by such calamities. Lord Varkin slumps back in his chair, murmuring that a demon whose name is recorded in history itself is nothing to take lightly, while rumors spread rapidly across the territory. He rubs his hands on the chair, allowing himself one small relief, that the sun god's heretic inquisitor managed to drive the demon back, before turning to consider how best to handle what comes next. Meanwhile, Ketel stretches and remarks that the territory certainly seems restless. Aquaz lies collapsed in bed, murmuring that the Lord must be getting a headache over all this. Her bare foot flexes against the floor as she begins to stir herself awake. Ketel asks if she's really planning to leave right away and suggests she rest properly first, but she refuses, insisting there's no time to waste since this must be reported to the Holy Land without a moment's hesitation. She hesitates, addressing him awkwardly as Lord Ketel. He tilts his head in confusion, and she bows properly, thanking him for saving her life, admitting she would have become the demon's plaything without him. He waves it off, saying there's no need for thanks. Grinning, he asks if that makes them friends now, doesn't it? She asks, since she's a heretic inquisitor of the sun god, whether he still wishes to befriend her. She's visibly stunned that a barbarian would call a servant of the sun god a friend and fall silent. Her red eyes flick toward him uncertainly, a tear catching the light. Not that there needs to be a reason, she admits, but still. He grins and asks simply, then it shouldn't matter, should it? By the way, he adds, there's something he's curious about. She asks simply what it is he wishes to know. He asks if it's really true that one must never speak a demon's name. She explains it's because of something called the mark. A demon inscribes a seal of darkness onto the human soul through its name, and that seal draws malevolent beings toward whoever bears it. Still, she adds firmly, a named demon cannot appear so easily. But it seems, she admits, that the demon realm, which should remain sealed, is somehow affecting the world, dungeons forming irregularly, and evil beings surfacing. It all began, she says, about a year ago. Ketel's brow furrows as he echoes the words back. A year ago? He drifts into thought, a memory surfacing of himself masked and fighting through a blizzard, quest markers ticking upward as he hunts werewolves across the white snowfield, wondering if that timing lines up with when he was working through his own quest. She thanks him properly, addressing him as Lord Ketel. Straightening herself, she tells him she must be going now. If he ever comes to their church, she adds, they'll welcome him warmly. A carriage rattles off down a sunlit forest road, carrying her away, and she sits quietly inside gazing out the window. Still, she murmurs, something nags at her. Why is it that the sun god hasn't given any prophecy concerning the barbarian?